across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. What on earth is going on here? Seriously, in the justice system, in the prison system. Does David Lammy have any grip? Does he have any concept of how to do his job? He said in Parliament, I know I'm the Justice Secretary. Well, does he? Is he actually aware of that? Is he aware of the responsibilities he has? Because he apparently knew that a prisoner, an asylum-seeking, sex-offending prisoner, had been released from prison by mistake. Another one, which happened last week. The police weren't told for 6 days by his officials. They were finally told on Tuesday. He later released a statement saying that his officials had been working, as he put it, through the night to solve this. Was he told? Was he not? I find it inconceivable that the Justice Secretary would not be told what had gone on. Then he came to Parliament and he was asked 5 times by James Cartledge for the Conservatives, has there been any other asylum seeker prisoner who's been released by mistake? He did not answer the question. Lo and behold, the news emerges. It comes out towards the end of Prime Minister's questions. James Cartledge from the Conservatives, asking the question, says to the Speaker, hold on a second, can I make a point of order here? Can I actually put this forward again? The Speaker says no. David Lammy says he's appalled, he's outraged. Well, if you're so appalled and you're so outraged, why did it take the system, your Ministry of Justice, your prison service, 6 days to tell the police this person was at large? He could be in Thailand, he could be in Nigeria, he could be in Australia, he could be anywhere, because he has a 6-day head start on the police. The Metropolitan Police now working apparently urgently to look after him, but it wasn't urgent enough for the prison service to give warning that he had gone out. They waited 6 days before realising, presumably, that they made a mistake. It is an utter shambles. There is no grip. There is no grip from Calamity Lammy whatsoever. And also, he apparently knew what was going on and failed to tell Parliament. That is our main story today. We're going to be talking about that with the retired prison governor in a second. Also the political editor of The Sun. We'll talk about Labour being accused of educational vandalism as it moves to dumb down the curriculum. A Reform UK council that says you've got to take down union flags so you won't get Christmas lights. And BBC bosses ignoring historians from Oxford and Cambridge universities because they wanted to push woke history. So what actually happened doesn't matter. It's just their truth. It's just their version of the BBC of the truth, as we know in regard to Donald Trump, as we know in regard to Gaza. We'll get the sport, we'll talk about Britain's sick note culture, and we'll find out what's in The Sun tomorrow. There's loads to come between now and 7, and I want to hear your views on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Let's get going here on Talk Drive. So as you may know, Gian Moore was sitting in for Julia today, and we went through PMQs. I was astonished at how angry David Lammy got when he was simply questioned. He said he'd been in Parliament for 25 years and he'd never seen such a dire spectacle. Well, actually, what was happening was James Cartledge, not a particularly well-known Conservative, he's the Shadow Defence Secretary, and he was in for Kemi Badenoch today because Never Hear Keir is away yet again. Lammy, as Deputy Prime Minister, was put up, Cartledge asking the questions, and 5 times, he asked a question to which he did not receive an answer. It was a fiery PMQs, Lammy defending his department after being pressed to apologise over the accidental release of the convicted sex offender Hadesh Kabatu. This is what happened.
After his release, I put in place the toughest checks we've ever had in the prison system. It is important that Lynn Owens is able to get to the bottom of her work. I suspect there'll be more checks and balances we need to do. What we inherited was a complicated system that they set up, letting people out on the sly. That's part of the problem, and we're trying to fix it.
That was in reply to another simple question. Harish Kabatu, the scumbag who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old who was wearing her school uniform whilst he was at the Bell Hotel, then he was let out mistakenly by David Lammy's officials and David Lammy's prison service. He was asked very straightforwardly, have you apologised, have you explained, have you lifted the phone to the family of that 14-year-old girl, that victim of that vile sex attack? The answer, of course, is no, of course he hasn't. Why would he do that? Why would he think that actually as Justice Secretary who presided over a complete fiasco, it would be a nice thing, it would be a reasonable thing, it would be a responsible thing, it would be something showing leadership, perhaps, to lift the phone, to talk to the victim's family and to say, I'm terribly sorry for the distress. We know from so many victims of sexual assault that I've spoken to, you're always looking over your shoulder, you're always thinking about the next encounter, you're walking out, you're saying what could happen. Well, what must it have been like for that teenage girl to know that Harish Kabatu was on the streets again, and because of pure incompetence of the prison service? So had he apologised to her family? Of course he flipping hadn't. But then the Shadow Defence Secretary asking the questions, James Cartledge pressed the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, on whether any other migrant prisoners had been released in error. Watch this.
He's the Justice Secretary. He's responsible for the justice system. He needs to take responsibility, and I'm asking him a straight question. And I'm going to repeat it once more for the avoidance of doubt, because he didn't answer it twice. He's here to answer questions. Can he reassure the House that since Kabatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? It's a clear question. Can he give an answer?
So at this point, David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary, at this point, he apparently knew, because his officials had been up all night. I'm going to actually read you. This is slightly out of sequence, but I'm going to do it because it makes sense. Deputy Prime Minister said, I am absolutely outraged and appalled by the mistaken release of a foreign criminal wanted by the police. The Metropolitan Police is leading an urgent manhunt, and my officials have been working through the night to take him back from prison. I used to work in the Ministry of Justice. Let me tell you something, if a prisoner had been let out by mistake, the Justice Secretary would have known about it and would have been told. He's outraged and appalled, but he's not outraged and appalled enough to tell Parliament about it when he's asked 5 times. Outraged, appalled, but not enough to tell Parliament the full truth. If he knew at that stage, which I think it's inconceivable, he did not. The Metropolitan Police is leading an urgent manhunt. If it's so urgent, why did the prison service not tell the Metropolitan Police that the prisoner was on the loose? He was released in error on Wednesday. It was Tuesday, nearly a week later, before the Metropolitan Police were told about it. So the prisoner, released in error, who has committed sexual crimes previously, had a 6-day head start. David Lammy is outraged and appalled, but had the opportunity 5 times to tell the nation and did not. In fact, he had an opportunity for many days to tell the public and did not. He chose not to. He chose to either keep that information inside the prison service or inside the Ministry of Justice as its parent body, or he knew and decided not to make a statement and not to know. My officials have been working through the night to take him back to prison. If they're working through the night, did they tell the Justice Secretary? The strong likelihood is that they did. I would be really surprised if they did not. So after the same question was put to him 5 times, David Lammy appeared rattled, he definitely got rattled, and he pivoted to Conservative failures. Just have a look and see how rattled he was.
In 25 years in this House, I've not witnessed a more shameful spectacle, frankly, than what the party opposite left in our justice system. Their criminal negligence on his watch as a former Justice Minister. They left our prisons on the brink of collapse entirely, threatening to allow offenders to run wild on our streets. He knows that. Rape victims waiting years for their day in court. He knows that. Neighbourhood policing decimated, leaving our people feeling unsafe in their communities, and they haven't learned a thing.
Really angry, blaming everybody but himself, taking absolutely no responsibility and not answering the question. Kemi Badenoch's reaction. James Cartledge asked the Deputy Prime Minister 5 times to tell us if another migrant sex offender had been accidentally released from prison. Instead of answering, Lammy lost his temper. Now we read it has happened again and he's been on the run for a week. This is a shambles of a government. Can be made, Knox not perfect, but it's very difficult to disagree with a single word of that. If you're watching on the telly, you may also have noticed, this is a tangential issue, but it's one worth making. David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister of our country, at Prime Minister's Questions, the most public event of the House of Commons all week, not wearing a poppy. He paid tribute to our veterans at the start of PMQs, and we are told by his spokesman later, said that Mr Lammy had done a tribute to veterans. The Deputy Prime Minister, all ministers and the Prime Minister salute the fallen and those who have served our country both in the past and present. We will never forget those who fought to defend our freedom. If you will never forget them, why would you not remember to wear a poppy? This is a Deputy Prime Minister who is not up to the job. He cannot run a department. He cannot take responsibility. And he cannot answer simple, straightforward questions in the House of Commons. Yet, as far as he's concerned, it's the Conservatives. They're all at fault. It's everything they did. I'm not saying for a second that the Conservatives weren't at fault and ran the prison system brilliantly. Of course they didn't. They didn't build enough prison places. But we're in a situation where we have a Justice Secretary who has no grip. Let's talk to Mark Hammersley, retired prison governor. Mark, is anything I've said unfair?
No, I think you've summed it up quite well, Peter. It's atrocious what has happened, and it's an embarrassment all round for anybody involved. I think, like you, I don't know the circumstances of this actual case, but after recent events and after so much publicity and so much increased scrutiny and increased checks for something to be what seems like something to be repeated very quickly in another prison is embarrassing beyond belief, really. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to, I've been on your show a few times and I've explained some of the procedures that are hugely complicated with involving releasing prisoners, which is true. Working out prisoners' release dates is very, very complicated, and it's not something Joe Public can do. However, in spite of all that, you can't carry on making mistakes like this.
Why would it be the case that the police wouldn't have been informed? Surely, if a prisoner is released in error, maybe they didn't work it out for 6 days. I mean, that's the conclusion many people will draw, because surely if you're running a prison, you lose a prisoner or you release someone who hasn't been released and you don't realise, surely the first thing you do is ring the police and say, we've made a mistake, there's someone on the loose, try and find them. Yeah,
for sure. Again, we're talking without full knowledge, but at the time they released him, obviously the people involved, having done all the checks, having done all the work, thought they were releasing him correctly. And I can only imagine it didn't come to light until this much time later. I'll be very surprised if they found out shortly afterwards they released him by mistake, but have kept it quiet for 4 days. I think that's very, very unlikely. More likely, I would imagine, is the mistake hasn't become known to a few days later. Because clearly, we are human. People do make mistakes. We're not perfect and this sort of stuff. But when you do things, you can make things worse or make things better according to what you do. And if you have made a mistake, you can't go back and undo it. But what you can do is let people know as soon as possible. Yes. To try and correct it. That you'd be, getting into even bigger territory if you tried to cover it up or not tell people. If you've done something wrong, you have to, you put your hands up. I've done something wrong, but this is what it is, and now you try and correct it and try and get other people involved, don't you? So I can only imagine it hasn't come to light until this much later.
And Wandsworth involved as well. We remember in September 2 years ago, 2023, Daniel Khalif was awaiting trial for spying for Iran. He escaped from the same prison after strapping himself to the underside of a food delivery truck. He was later arrested in Northolt 3 days after a huge manhunt. There was also a female prison officer who was filmed having sex with an inmate. Clearly, HMP Wandsworth has not covered itself in glory here either.
No, it's probably one of the worst prisons that it could happen to, with the amount of things that have gone on at Wandsworth, high-profile things, and the amount of attention that it's had. There's not. I mean, it is another different incident that's happened at Wandsworth, but those incidents you talk of were both extremely embarrassing, extremely high profile, and for another one like this to happen in the same prison again is. It couldn't have been worse. I don't think it couldn't have been a worse prison for it to happen to than Wandsworth, and that must be a very tough place. Yeah.
Mark, thank you. That's Mark Hammersley, who's a retired prison governor. Thanks for joining us today. James in Devon says, isn't it time we had an independent Speaker of the House of Commons rather than the shambles we have now every week? Labour politicians don't answer the questions asked. Today, 5 times Lammy didn't answer questions in PMQs. The clue's in the name. And every week, whenever Reform MPs stand up, they get a barrage of abuse and prevented from speaking. It is an embarrassment. Well, I think I'm actually a reasonable fan of Lindsay Hoyle, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who is certainly better than Billy Burkow, who was an absolute disgrace of a human being and is rightly banned from the Houses of Parliament for being an absolute tyrant and a bully and a horrible, horrible human being. The point with Sir Lindsay Hoyle is that when James Cartledge said at the end of Prime Minister's questions, hold on a second here, actually, he knew, or at least should have known in terms of Lammy, the news is now out there. Surely we should pull him up on that through it's a parliamentary procedure called a point of order, and the Speaker denied it. So I think that was a big mistake. Lots more to report. In fact, we have some breaking news now. In that, sorry, this is actually unbelievable. Wandsworth Prison has released another prisoner in error. This was on the 3rd of November, so when was that? 2 days ago. This was on Monday. 35-year-old William Smith, who goes by Billy, was released by accident. He was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences at Croydon Crown Court, and on the same day he was released. I'm just taking this in here. This is a third person in the last 2 weeks, right? So you've got Billy Smith is his name. He goes to Croydon Crown Court. He's sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences. He goes back to HMP Wandsworth and they release him on the same day. This is an utter shambles. This is an utter shambles. David Lammy has no grip. There is no grip here. What on earth is going on? 3 prisoners. You've got Harish Kabata, who's a sex offender. You've got this Algerian scumbag as well, the fugitive Algerian migrant sex offender who they let out, didn't tell the police for 6 days. Lammy apparently knew about it at PMQs and didn't tell us. And now, breaking news literally in the last couple of minutes, a 3rd prisoner. Wandsworth released a 35-year-old Billy Smith who was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences at Croydon Crown Court, and on the same day he was released. What on earth is going on? Let us know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Jack Elson from The Sun coming up next.
what we see now is almost like 5-year-olds chasing a ball around a pitch, rather than actually setting out a strategy and saying, right, we're going to deal with local communities. And I think that's one of the key aspects around, why do we feel less safe in our local communities, is because one of the issues is we don't see police officers walking around our local community.
Absolutely.
My sister last week had her car really badly damaged by somebody who stopped, but he had no MOT, no anything else. So she calls the police, can you come down and look, investigate this and how it helped me? No, we'll just send you a form.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Right, we're in Brenda from Bristol territory here. Not another one? Right. HMP Wandsworth, His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth, has released another prisoner in error. This is the third prisoner that we know about. There could well be more. In the last 15 days. This was on Monday. 35-year-old William Smith, Billy Smith as he's known, was released by accident. This comes off the back of another story that was just at lunchtime. This other story is only about 3 hours old here. David Lammy could have told us about it before, but he didn't. About the fugitive Algerian migrant sex offender. He is a migrant foreign criminal. He wasn't an asylum seeker, I understand, but a migrant foreign criminal, accidentally released from Wandsworth Prison. The police weren't told for a week. It's a shambles. It's an utter shambles. Simon in Northamptonshire, first caller of Drive today, 0344 499 1000. Simon, what on earth is going on here?
I don't even know where to start with this. I listened to PMQs and I listened to Lammy, and I was just shocked because you can get, sometimes they'll give what I'd call a politician's answer, where they'll dance around it a bit and not directly lie, but still somewhat give you the inference of what they're saying. But Lammy just blustered. It was so transparent how angry he was getting and trying to deflect, and the way that the Conservative MP,
James Cartledge, yeah,
was just saying, I'll ask him again. I'll ask him again.
I thought Cartledge was really polite. I thought he was really polite. He was really straightforward. He just said, just give me an answer to the question. Lammy had this sort of righteous indignation. How dare you ask me these questions? Don't you know I'm the Deputy Prime Minister? It was like, well, the clue's in the question. The clue's in the name of this, Prime Minister's questions. You're sitting in for the Prime Minister, who, yet again, another crisis. He's nowhere to be seen, never hear, care, and Lammy hasn't got a grip, Simon.
And that's what I thought. I've never had much respect for Lammy because I've seen how he's been on those many, many media clips you get of him that are circulated that show he's just not up to the job. And this was a prime example because I thought, I was just waiting for it. I thought there's going to be some news breaking about this. They clearly know it's a gotcha question.
I think Cartledge knew. I'd be really surprised if Cartledge didn't know it was coming.
It was so specific, and are we about to hear? No, you couldn't have it. They couldn't have released another prisoner so quickly, and it just being a joke. If I was Lammy, you'd think, do you know what? Just take this from the chin and say, okay, yes, there is something else I'd like to announce to the House. But he doubles down, and it's like, you wonder why no one's got any faith, not just in you, but not in this current government. It's you have to be cajoled into revealing these things. And as you said, it's that indignation he showed of like, fix him here. I'm like, no, you're the one in charge of this mess. I won't say the words I was going to say, but it's like you are running a clown show here, and you wonder why people are saying your popularity is going down. Do you honestly think people will vote for another 5 years of
well, exactly. And it's also how angry he was. How angry he was at how dare this Tory, this awful Tory, was a Justice Minister previously, how dare he question him. I just thought the righteous indignation, how angry he got as a result of being questioned, was really quite telling as well, Simon. I wonder what you thought.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly my thoughts. I watched that and I thought, this isn't just someone, say like Keir Starmer, where he'll give a bit of a woolly answer, and he's done it a few times, about the raising taxes, where he'll dance around the subject. And you might think, okay, do you know what? You're trying not to avoid it because you know you don't want to give the answer, but you're at least addressing the question to some degree. Lammy is just there. pontificating about loads of things that have gone on before. And it's like, we know the Conservatives were not good while they were in office, but address the issue that is being told, that he does it and doubles down and does that kind of like, what was it he said to him? It's like, get a grip, man.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Well,
really?
I'd like Lammy to get a grip. I'd like Lammy to get a grip of his department. That's what I'd like to happen.
Yeah, perfectly. I mean, he's just shown that he is just not suited to that role. I don't think any of them that they've got Ben suited to their roles in Parliament.
Oh, we're just losing you, Simon, but the phone is defeating us there. I think you're maybe on the move, but you've made some really, really good points there. So thank you for that. Matthew in Sunderland says, evidently, the Tories took the prison keys when they left office, so they sabotaged Lammy. Graham in Bushy says, David Lammy has gone from Calamity Lammy. Has he gone from Calamity Lammy to lying Lammy? Simon in Canterbury, hi Cardi P. The minute Lammy started ranting, it was obvious the game was up. He has misled the House with his reluctance to answer a very straightforward question. This fool should be nowhere near the Cabinet. Mind you, he's not the only one. David in Gloucester, what do you have to say about this? What are your thoughts, David?
Good evening. How is everybody?
Yeah, it's I don't know what's going on here. Clearly, the government doesn't have a grip. David Lammy said, get a grip. He doesn't have a grip, does he?
Well, it's blooming awful. I watch PMQs. I don't know why I bother a lot of the time. But this one, it was an absolute disgrace. He clearly lied, Lammy. He must go. He broke the ministerial code. I mean, he clearly known. I reckon he must have known about this one that you've just announced as well.
It is basically inconceivable. It is basically inconceivable that he did not know about it. The question is why he didn't just come clean, or why his department, if his officials, as he puts it in this statement, David, if his officials were working through the night to get this Algerian back into prison, Brahim Kader Sharif is his name. If they were working through the night, surely they would have not let the Justice Secretary know, especially before he was about to go in front of the nation, in front of the House of Commons.
Well, and this one that you've just announced today, this chap that they've released, this
Billy Smith,
William, or
yeah.
Well, I mean, to let two out in what, a week for the same prison?
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell is going on? I mean, the governor, I mean, he's got to resign with immediate effect, surely.
And this is the same prison, HMP Wandsworth, this is the same prison that Daniel Khalif escaped from, and the same prison where a female prison officer was filmed having sex with a male inmate.
Well, yeah, but they should go down there, they should sack him with immediate effect.
Yeah.
But Lammy should go. I mean, Lammy's got to go now. I mean, he should resign. I mean, he broke the ministerial code. And what on earth is Lindsay, the Speaker, doing? He is in cahoots with the Labour Party. He last week with Nigel Farage, he let them shout all over him. We finished.
Well, that was the Deputy Speaker, in fairness, Judith Cummins. But listen, I think the point is a good one, David, in that I felt let down by Lindsay Hoyle today. I think what Lindsay Hoyle should have done, very straightforwardly, is said, James Cartledge, you want to follow up, there is a point of order. David Lammy scuttled away, got out of the House of Commons as soon as he could. David, thanks for your points. We've got a voice note now from Hev in Kent on released prisoners. This is what Hev thinks.
All this business about this other inmate that is no longer an inmate and all the rest of it that's out on the streets. So why is it that it's taken 6 days plus and we still don't even have a photograph? I haven't seen a photograph. Is there one circulating? Please tell me, because if they can't find him within 6 days, then surely they need the public help.
I know exactly what you mean. I think they've put out a picture now of this dude, Billy Smith, who's the third prisoner who's gone. I haven't seen a picture so far. I'm just looking at the team behind the glass. They haven't seen either one of Brahim Kader Sharif, who is the migrant sex offender, the foreign criminal who was in the system. And then, of course, he remains at large. So we've got at least 2 people that we know of who are at large at the moment. Brahim Kader Sharif, who's a migrant sex offender, mistakenly freed from HMP Wandsworth a week ago. Police not told for 6 days. And now another one from the same prison, released on Monday, Billy Smith, who was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences. Well, we can have his picture on the screen there at the moment. Well, we know that he was released the same day as he was sentenced to prison in Croydon Crown Court. I can almost say that, Croydon Crown Court. This is a shambles. This is an utter shambles. We're going to keep talking about this. I want your reaction to it. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Keith in Durham's been in touch and says there's an absolute disgrace that Lammy was aware that yet another asylum offender, I don't think this is an asylum offender, I think it's a foreign criminal, migrant foreign criminal in this case. Anyway, Keith, but not to worry, has been mistakenly released, this time by HMP Wandsworth. However, he refused on 5 occasions during PMQs today to answer this question raised by the Shadow Defence Secretary. The man is totally incompetent and should be removed as Justice Secretary with immediate effect. Mick says Angela Rayner must be doubled up with laughter at Lammy's performance as Deputy PM. Another person says, hi Peter, let's not forget our dear Justice Secretary is the same person who said the one in, one out was working well when that migrant returned to the UK. I really do not know what to say anymore. Jane said, David Lammy probably took questions from the Prime Minister, just don't answer the questions like him. I'm going to say something really controversial, probably the most controversial thing I'll say today. I think Keir Starmer's actually better than David Lammy. I think David Lammy's actually worse than the Prime Minister at PMQs. This is just beyond belief. Andrew Ellison is head of campaigns at the Popcorn's Popular Conservatives. Andrew, where are we? I mean, I'm almost speechless. I'm never ever going to be speechless, but I'm basically as speechless as I can be at this utter shambles with every moment. 4 hours it's been since the Algerian migrant sex offender Brahim Kader Sharif, we know, was gone. Now another one, we've got Billy Smith, who was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences at Croydon Crown Court, then released the same day.
You know, if this was in the thick of it, Peter, or on Dead Ringers or something like that, some form of comical sketch, you know, they would dismiss it, wouldn't they? They'd reject
it as a storyline as unrealistic. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It is absolutely incredible. I mean, where do we start here? I mean, David Lammy's performance of Prime Minister's questions today was absolutely appalling.
It was embarrassing.
I mean, someone should have a word with him. I mean, there is a way of deflecting questions without just getting angry and shouting at your opposite number. And he could have got out of that one a little bit earlier. He could have just owned up, or he could have said, well, not that I'm aware, or perhaps I just need to find more information. I'll make a statement to the House in future. There's all sorts of ways of getting out of it without that lamentable performance. And I do rather agree with you, Peter. I think Keir Starmer is better than David Lammy. I don't think anyone could be worse than David Lammy after the performance that we saw at the dispatch box today. But what the hell is going on in our prison system? What is going on specifically in this week in His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth? How can this be allowed to happen? How can you release prisoners mistakenly and then not realise for a few days afterwards? And then, as one of your callers said, someone who left a voice note, said, well, what about this first prisoner who we've learned of earlier today? Is there a picture of him out there? And yes, there is at the second one, but where's the picture of that one? So if a member of the public saw him, we wouldn't know who he was. And this is 1 week later. I mean, honestly, you know, I'm not quite speechless, but I'm very exasperated.
Let's just remind ourselves of David Lammy here. I played this clip earlier. I just want to play it again. Maybe there are people who are just joining us, or maybe they just switched on their radio or switched on their telly. So the same question was put to David Lammy at Prime Minister's Questions. He was standing in for Never Hear Keir, who, because there's a crisis, he's obviously not in the country. David Lammy pivoted to Conservative failures. He got angry. He said in 25 years in Parliament he's never had seen such a shambles, a spectacle as the Conservatives. Just see how rattled David Lammy was here. If he'd known, and he said, yes, do you know what, fair cop, we screwed up, you're right, there is someone on the run, we should have told you before now and we didn't, I think people would have respected him. If he thought there wasn't a migrant sex offender on the loose, he should have said, well, no, there isn't. No, we haven't let out anybody else. No, we're fine. All is well. But the fact is he obfuscated. He did everything he could but give a clear answer. This is how angry he got about it.
In 25 years in this House, I've not witnessed a more shameful spectacle, frankly, than what the party opposite left in our justice system. Their criminal negligence on his watch as a former Justice Minister. They left our prisons on the brink of collapse entirely, threatening to allow offenders to run wild on our streets. He knows that. Rape victims waiting years for their day in court. He knows that. Neighbourhood policing decimated, leaving our people feeling unsafe in their communities, and they haven't learned a thing.
David Lammy there, not wearing a poppy, not mastering his brief, and not knowing what decimated means. Andrew, it is not a government in control.
No, it's not a government in control at all. And I do apologise. I forgot to put my jacket on, which is the reason why I'm not wearing a poppy.
Right.
Now that you've mentioned it, makes me feel rather guilty. But
I wouldn't worry.
But this government is not in control. It's not in control in any sphere of government, is it? I mean, it just stumbles from one disaster to another. I mean, we are only 16 months into this government, and I honestly don't think that the country can cope with it for about another 3 years. I haven't a clue what sort of state the country's going to be in at the end of it. I think that's culturally, I think it's economically as well, everything. I just think that the country can cope with another 3 years of this.
Andrew, thank you. That's Andrew Allison, Head of Campaigns for the Popcorn's Popular Conservatives. Should say that some of the other news networks are running a speech live and uninterrupted by the new Mayor of New York City, Mamdani. I just wonder if the BBC are going to refer to him as a far left person, which he is. He's also said, I take the issue of anti-Semitism seriously. Yeah, it's when you have to say you take the issue of anti-Semitism seriously that I would question the new Mayor of New York. Back here in the UK, the Deputy Prime Minister, under huge pressure. Let's see what Bob thinks. He sent me a voice note on this on prisoner releases.
Listen, I've been to prison myself, and I can tell you now, if I were in prison and I were being released early, I'm going to say to the scours, what are you doing? Why am I being released early? I'm going to ask them. So all these prisoners what are getting out early, why aren't they saying to the scours? They must be saying something. This is ridiculous. The prison service are doing what they want.
Bob, it's a fair point, and Hadish Kabatu, of course, went back a number of times. Well, what, 5 times he went back in to the reception to say, oh, why have you released me? I'm meant to be being deported. I mean, when the prisoners themselves are the ones saying, hold on a second, I think you've released me in error, well then you've got a problem. Jim in Cornwall says, another accidental prison release. Someone in the government is not telling us something. Who is giving these release orders? Another person says, some people do think the Speaker has been more lenient to the Labour government on certain occasions. Paul in Manchester says, this government isn't competent, Peter. I wonder if these 2 prisoners received the £76 release payment. When will the day come that they release a really dangerous person? Well, I would say maybe not a fraudster necessarily, but certainly you've got this Brahim Kader Sharif person who is a migrant sex offender mistakenly freed. I mean, he is a dangerous person. He may not be shooting and killing people, but if he's sexually assaulting people, that is very dangerous. Bob says, OMG, Lammy is a calamity, all bluster and self-important. He must go, says Bogner Bob. Listen, you have an absolute right, well, not an absolute right, but you have perhaps more excuse to be arrogant, to say to people, oh, you know, don't you know who you're talking to? I'm the Deputy Prime Minister. If you are doing work and having a level of competence that is befitting of that office, of someone who should be in control of their brief, in control of their department. But David Lammy has none of those things. He has all the arrogance and nothing to back it up. Nick says Wandsworth Prison needs to be shut down immediately. All prisoners relocated, all staff immediately sacked, and Calamity Lammy needs to be sacked today. Don in Chelmsford says, I'm probably becoming a bore. Most of the inadequacy in the public sector is down to poor quality managers. Why should the prison service be any different? Don, I think you're absolutely right. And the question is, why is this continuing to happen? Well, that's bad management. Why at the BBC, for example, which we'll talk about later on in the programme, why do these scandals keep happening? Why was, for example, Greg Wallace allowed to get away with what he got away with for so long? Because managers didn't tell him no. Alan in Peterborough. If David Lammy knew about the released prisoner for a week and did not let the police know, then he's complicit in deliberately putting the British people in danger from a convicted sex offender. Well, there's no suggestion that David Lammy knew for a week. I think he knew this morning, or alternatively, overnight. Will we get a clear answer on that? Will he come clean? Will he apologise to the House of Commons? Alan continues, and after what happened over the weekend, Lammy must resign. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss. Prison failures by Calamity Lammy, they just keep coming. There are not 1, not 2, but 3 prisoners currently on the loose who've been released in error. The police don't know where they are. Stay with us.
Don't forget, we are competing against, I guess if you're growing up in Britain, right, you're competing against kids from other countries where hopefully this educational vandalism isn't happening, but also kids here are going to be competing against kids from whose parents have sent them to private schools where this educational vandalism won't be happening, where they will be learning reading, writing and arithmetic, where they will be being tested to the very highest levels, and they're the ones who are going to succeed.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to Nevin, who's been in touch on prisoner releases. Another voice note. This is what Nevin says.
One more prisoner released, two actually more prisoners released in error today or last week or whenever it happened to be. We don't quite know. Nothing coming up the line. Lammy clearly knew about it, as you've already quite rightly pieced together and pointed out. It was hard to know why Cartledge was keeping going down that route, but it's pretty obvious now because he knew and the Tories knew, obviously, just beforehand. But Lammy has misled the House here. It's as simple as that. And that is a resignation issue. He has knowingly misled the House because he must have known. So this is a straight resignation issue. But of course, he is so arrogant and so feels he is above the law, as indeed they all seem to in this government, that nothing will happen. And we'll just keep going in the absolute shambolic doom loop that we're on.
Nevin, thank you. It's hard to disagree with a single word of that. Stephen Swinford, who's the political editor of The Times and one of the journalists I trust, absolutely, when he puts pen to paper or types something or puts it on Twitter, I trust him. He says, I'm told David Lammy had a pre-prepared statement that was ready to go on the accidental release of the migrant sex offender as he stood at the dispatch box. It expressed outrage on behalf of the victims and criticised the Tories, but he didn't use it, instead refusing to comment when it was repeatedly put to him that a prisoner had been released. Lammy is said not to have wanted to preempt any statement from the Metropolitan Police. The statement was there in case the news broke during Prime Minister's questions. But there are mounting questions in government this afternoon about his refusal to answer very pointed questions from the Tories on it and the defiant tone he took at the dispatch box. That is fascinating. I'm not surprised at all. And apparently Lammy was briefed last night. So if you're asked a question about something you know about, if you're asked a question about a migrant sex offender on the loose and you choose not to tell Parliament about it, well, there should be severe consequences. I think this is a resigning issue. Stephen's in East Yorkshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this?
Well, it's exactly as all the previous points have covered. I mean, what the bit that got me the most was Lammy's indignation when he said there's victims of rape who are waiting for their day in court and he's blaming the Tories. And yeah, some of the prison system was a bit chaotic behind the Tories. But I do think the Conservatives dropped the ball here. You need to nail them down and ask a definitive question with a yes or no
But he did. But they did. James Cartledge did ask an absolutely straightforward question. He said, have there been any more migrant sex offenders released by accident? You can't be clearer than that. And Lammy knew the answer and didn't tell Parliament what the answer is. He also said, as you correctly say, he started shouting at the Tories about rape victims. You're the one, under your watch, a sex offender, two sex offenders actually, were on the loose.
I have got real problems with the Speaker of the House of Commons as well now, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, with his, I think there's a clear bias there with the way in which he's dealing with issues. And I mean, Lammy basically threw his rattle out the pram. You could see he was getting more and more, and I thought they should have pursued it more.
Yeah.
I perfectly agree. I think he should have resigned completely. It's a complete and utter shambles with what is going on with the judicial system and the prison system in this country. I mean, what happens now with the... I've read something somewhere that a judge can actually ask why a prisoner hasn't been sentenced once the sentence has been passed. You may know more about this than me.
I don't know about that particular issue, but clearly there are so many issues, Stephen, as you correctly say. We know about Brahim Kader Sharif. Thank you, by the way, Stephen. We know about Brahim Kader Sharif. He is the Algerian migrant sex offender accidentally released from Wandsworth Prison. We know he entered the UK illegally on a visit visa in 2019, overstayed the visa, and apparently a case was created on the 6th of February 2020. He is in the initial stages of the deportation process. So we knew on the 6th of February 2020, the Home Office knew on the 6th of February 2020 that he should be deported. Here we are, what, 5, nearly 6 years later. Hold on, have I got that right? Yeah, nearly 6 years later, we're in a situation where he's in the initial stages of the deportation process. Well, why wasn't he deported at any time in the last 5 and nearly 6 years? They're going to seek to deport foreign nationals who commit crimes on British soil. Well, good for you. Why is it taking you 5, nearly 6 years to do that? Home Office out of control, justice system out of control, prisoners, prison officers, governors not doing their job, releasing the wrong people. A Deputy Prime Minister, when questioned about it and asked a perfectly reasonable, logical, straightforward question, knowing the answer, having been briefed on it last night, knowing what's been going on, having a statement in his hand, in his pack that he has, not telling the truth, not telling Parliament what it should have been told. Paul in Bedfordshire, I said I watched PMQs today. Are you shocked at the aggressive and intimidatory attitude of our Prime Minister, or Deputy Prime Minister, conducting himself? I'm sure his godmother who was watching would have been very proud. Great show, Cardi P. Yes, we were told that the reason he had a new suit on, the reason he'd forgotten to put his poppy on, was because he had a new suit on. Well, let me tell you something. I have one of these. I have one of these ceramic poppies. I had a suit on yesterday and the ceramic poppy was in it. I took the ceramic poppy out because I'm wearing a different jacket today. That's what most usual people do. You say, it's poppy season, I've got to wear my poppy. Kevin's in Dorset, 0344 499 1000. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. I'm going to be fairly punctual and precise, so it makes things easier. Okay, so Customs and Border Force, not really fit for purpose because they can't keep our country safe. Number 2, solicitors acting for migrants to stop them leaving the country, to keep them here. Then we've got number 3, so the police, two-tier policing. We don't get the truth from the police. We don't have confidence in them. They're too busy arresting our own people. Prisoners released willy-nilly, as we can quite clearly see. So again, it's not fit for purpose. Government, i.e. Lammy, standing in for the Prime Minister, so he is the Prime Minister effectively on this day, broken ministerial code, and also in charge of the justice system. And if it's all broken, then obviously he must be broken. We then move on to then the overall situation with the government in total freefall. Therefore, the people in this country are not safe. If we are not safe, then the King should really be inviting maybe the Prime Minister in for a little chat of either dissolving...
If he can get hold of him, Kevin, if he's here in the country.
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. And if he can actually talk or have a script to stick to. He then asks him, he's got 2 choices. He dissolves Parliament and puts in somebody temporary on a so-called maybe war footing, you might want to call it. Or he says, you call a general election immediately. And then on top of all of that, what would the BBC be saying about this at the moment?
Well, the BBC have been saying very little about it at the moment because they're too busy until a few minutes ago. I have the screen in front of me here. It's obviously up in the studio and I can see what's on Sky and what's on the BBC. And until a few minutes ago, the BBC were running a long speech by the newly elected mayor of New York, who is a hard left socialist. Will they call him far left? I don't know. So they're not talking about the crisis in this country. Instead, they're running a speech uninterrupted by the mayor of a foreign city.
Yeah, it's all part of, I don't want to use the word, if you're going to call someone a conspiracy theorist, I think the government are more of a conspiracy.
Or just a cock-up as well. Kevin, listen, thank you so much for your call. You speak a lot of sense there. Speaking of two-tier policing, he was talking about two-tier policing there, Kevin, and talking about the fact that we just don't get what we want out of our justice system. Now's a good time for me to say that it has now been 130 days since Pascal Robinson Foster was at Glastonbury. He shouted death, death to the IDF, and he hasn't been arrested, to our knowledge. He hasn't been interviewed, to our knowledge. He hasn't been cautioned or charged. And that's really, really, really straightforward. Chief Constable Sarah Crew, the invitation is still there to come on the programme anytime you like to talk about this and tell us why it's 130 days since on national television the crime, I believe, of incitement was committed by the person I believe to be an anti-Semite, Pascal Robinson Foster, and so far hasn't been interviewed, to our knowledge, hasn't been arrested, hasn't been charged, nothing's happened. Why? Lots more on Lammy. Dan in Tonbridge says, well, what a surprise. David Lammy's first time standing up at PMQs, and he shows how incompetent he actually is. This man can run a bath without flooding the House. He has to go along with the rest of the Labour Party. Terry in Birmingham says, is this prisoner farce what Starmer meant with one in, one out? Mick is in Wallington says, the public need to know if the released prisoner Billy Smith is a danger to a vulnerable section of the public. Was he convicted of deception or fraud upon elderly victims? Very good point there, Mick. We don't know. Several fraud charges we know that he was found guilty of. David Lammy has no poppy, says Carol. Lammy given poppy and puts it on the wrong lapel. Lammy puts poppy on the wrong lapel sideways. Yes, that's what happened, Carol. We were also told on the poppy issue as well. Let me just read you what the Prime Minister's spokesman said. Mr Lammy had a tribute to veterans at the start of Prime Minister's questions. We will never forget those who fought to defend our freedom. Well, we won't, but one way to remember them is to remember to put on a poppy. But the Deputy Prime Minister, knowing he would be in the House of Commons and millions of people would be watching and millions of people would see clips of him, forgot to put it on. And no one, not a single person around him in the Labour Party, political advisors, civil servants, whoever, said, do you know what, Deputy Prime Minister, you probably better put a poppy on because you're going to be on the telly and everybody's going to see this. It's just, the poppy thing is a reasonably small thing, but it's an important thing. It's an important thing that matters to me. I know it matters to you. We've loads of veterans and veterans' families and military families who watch and listen to this programme, and it's just another indication of the contempt which David Lammy holds us in. Lots more on this coming very, very soon. We're going to talk to the Conservatives after the break. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good evening, it's Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 5 o'clock. There is an absolute shambles at the heart of our prisons and justice system. David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, not telling Parliament what he knew about an escaped, well, not an escaped prisoner, a prisoner who was released in error. Now, about half an hour ago, we're told there's another one from the same prison, His Majesty's Prison, Wandsworth. Is an utter shambles. We're going to talk about the BBC bosses as well, ignoring experts to push woke history with the chairwoman of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. There's so many allegations about how they've dealt with the Middle East, and indeed another story about how they apparently faked a clip of Donald Trump. That story's been going on for a few days. We'll talk about Bonfire Night. That's tonight. Remember the 5th of November. Emergency services bracing for Bonfire Night. And we'll talk about your pets as well. We'll get the sun. And let me tell you, there are a load of calls coming in. We want more. We want to get as many calls on the air between now and 7 o'clock. Get your voice note in as well about this absolute shambles in regard to 2 prisoners right now on the loose who should not have been released from prison. One of them is a fugitive Algerian migrant sex offender. Yes, really. Then David Lammy was asked about it in Parliament, and guess what? He didn't tell us everything he knew. It is just a shambles. Loads to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your voice on the air. Tell me what you think. You can also text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk Drive. So let me just bring you through this. Maybe you've been at work all day, maybe you're one of the car dwellers, you're heading home for the evening and you're thinking, what on earth is going on? Heard something about David Lammy earlier. What's going on? Let me just bring you through this, right? Prime Minister's Questions, I cover it every week with Julia. It was Jane Moore who was in the chair today because Julia's off. I go through this every week. Usually it's, there's something, maybe it's a bit interesting, maybe we cover it in Talk Drive a little bit later on. But today it was really fiery because David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Justice Secretary, remember, was standing in for Keir Starmer, who, guess what, is never here Keir. David Lammy was asked about whether he had apologised to the family of the victim of Hadish Kabatu, the sex offender, the Bell Hotel migrant who was mistakenly released from Chelmsford Nick. He was very reasonably asked by the Conservative James Cartledge, who was deputising for Kemi Badenoch, have you, Justice Secretary, lifted the phone? Have you had a chat with the victim's family, 14-year-old girl who was in her school uniform? Have you had a chat with them? Well, guess what? He hadn't, and he got pretty angry about it. This is what David Lammy said.
After his release, I put in place the toughest checks we've ever had in the prison system. It is important that Lynn Owens is able to get to the bottom of her work. I suspect there'll be more checks and balances we need to do. What we inherited was a complicated system that they set up, letting people out on the sly. That's part of the problem, and we're trying to fix it.
So that, I believe, was the first question. Then you get 6 questions, as you may know. You get 6 questions if you're the opposition. Tories, in this case, getting 6 questions. First question was, have you, Justice Secretary, lifted the phone, spoken to the victim's family? He hadn't. Then the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge, for the Conservatives, pressed the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, on whether any other migrant prisoners, like Hadish Kabatu, had been released in error. This is what David Lammy said.
He's the Justice Secretary. He's responsible for the justice system. He needs to take responsibility, and I'm asking him a straight question. And I'm going to repeat it once more for the avoidance of doubt, because he didn't answer it twice. He's here to answer questions. Can he reassure the House that since Kabatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? It's a clear question. Can he give an answer?
So the actual answer is yes. Yes, we have. We've managed to release someone. His name is Brahim Kader Sharif. he is a migrant sex offender. He was mistakenly freed from His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth a week ago. By the way, we didn't tell the police for 6 days. Well, did they know? Did they not know they'd released him? They didn't tell the police. David Lammy knew this because he was briefed on it last night by his officials. He had a statement in his hand, at his fingertips, on the dispatch box in the House of Commons. So the obvious, straightforward, honest thing to say would be, yes, fair cop, this has happened, let me tell you about it. Instead, after the same question was put to him 5 times, David Lammy did this.
In 25 years in this House, I've not witnessed a more shameful spectacle, frankly, than what the party opposite left in our justice system. Their criminal negligence on his watch as a former Justice Minister. They left our prisons on the brink of collapse entirely, threatening to allow offenders to run wild on our streets. He knows that. Rape victims waiting years for their day in court. He knows that. Neighbourhood policing decimated, leaving our people feeling unsafe in their communities, and they haven't learned a thing.
David Lammy there expressing his outrage about problems in the system, Crown Prosecution Service and court system in regard to prosecuting rapists. Well, at exactly the same time as he criticised the Conservative government's record, he had a piece of paper inches from him where he could have told the truth but chose not to in regard to a migrant sex offender mistakenly released from prison. A few minutes later, the story came out about Brahim Kader Sharif. Then David Lammy puts out a statement. I am absolutely outraged and appalled by the mistaken release of a foreign criminal. The Metropolitan Police is leading an urgent manhunt. It's so urgent that they didn't tell the police about it for 6 days. My officials have been working through the night to take him back to prison. They're working through the night, but he knew about it and then didn't tell Parliament. Then, when the story came out, James Cartledge, the Conservative asking the questions, you heard him there, he said, hold on a second, Mr. Speaker, I just want to make what's called in parliamentary terms a point of order. I just want to say, actually, hold on. I want to ask him again. I want to make clear that David Lammy knew about this and didn't tell us. Speaker didn't grant it. Speaker can grant a point of order or not grant a point of order. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. It's a shambles. Then later on, about 4:30, while we've been on air, about 40 minutes ago, more information. Guess what? They've let somebody else out of His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth, the same prison. So there are at least 2 prisoners. There might be more. We don't know. Are they going to tell us? Are they going to be honest with us? We don't know. Well, waiting patiently, and probably as exasperated as me, is Matt Vickers, who's the Shadow Home Office Minister and Conservative MP for Stockton West. Matt, are we through the looking glass here?
I mean, what a shambles, what an utter shambles. What message, I mean, it's actually laughable. It's so incompetent, so incapable, and such a shambles, it's laughable, and you could laugh at it if you didn't think about the message that sends to other criminals, the fear that people will have now walking around the streets in those parts of the world, and moreover, to the victims of these horrendous crimes who now see this. I mean, it's appalling. I mean, the thing is, they're releasing how many thousands of people early, and these are 2 who are still meant to be inside. And then for anybody today who watched the Deputy Prime Minister address, well, it showed his disdain for MPs and for Parliament today. The people you send to make the law and hold the government to account, the disdain he had in failing to answer the questions whilst he had that information at his fingertips, and he knows the public are watching. The disdain he has for the public, that he will stand at that dispatch box whilst knowing the facts. And I mean, it was the worst of politics. It completely undermines all trust anybody can have in this government, in our judicial system, and in politics, actually.
You've been breathing the same air as David Lammy for 6 years. He's been in Parliament for 25 years. You've been in Parliament for 6 years. Is this typical? Is this what he does? Did you expect him to do anything else? Because I've encountered Lammy a few times, I've reported on him, I've talked about him a number of times on air and so on. And what I see is someone who lets his arrogance and his combativeness cloud his judgment, if he actually has any judgment. Because what sort of a person does it take to know that there is a piece of paper beside him that has the truth on it, that could tell Parliament, which he's supposed to be accountable to, at Prime Minister's questions, here is the truth, I'm holding it in my hand, but I'm choosing and making an active decision as Deputy Prime Minister and as Justice Secretary not to give you the full facts. That just speaks volumes. And as you say, Matt, it is the worst of politics. This is why people hate politicians.
The entire reason he has stood at that dispatch box today is to answer questions from MPs. That's what our democracy is built on. That's what Parliament's built on. It relies on people coming, being honest, being upfront, taking questions and taking scrutiny to allow us to deliver better outcomes. The end result there is a guy. I have this weird, stupid opinion that MPs arrive in Parliament wanting to benefit their communities.
Many of them do. Many of them do.
And that's the basis that I start from. So I like to think that the 649 people who are in there beside me are doing, regardless of politics, regardless of everything else, are doing what they think is right, doing what is honest, doing what is in the interest of the public. He stood there with those answers beside him at the dispatch box and garbled a load of rubbish, knowing entirely the facts, having been briefed the night before and able to share those facts with Parliament, with the public. Devastating, absolutely devastating. It undermines all trust people can have in the government.
On his next rare public appearance in the United Kingdom, what should Keir Starmer do about this?
I think there needs to be an apology. A failure to complete. Well, there needs to be an apology about the utter shambles of releasing all these people early. It's laughable, the state of it, if it didn't have such serious consequences. If there wasn't people who live near that prison tonight wondering as they walk home what the consequence can be of having that foreign sex offender.
Although it could be anywhere because they didn't. Oh, it could be anywhere, Matt, because they didn't tell the police for 6 days.
So 6 days.
He's not necessarily in the local area. It could be anywhere. It could be in Australia.
But what does that mean for vulnerable people as they walk home tonight? But moreover, what does it mean to those victims who will already, no doubt, have been furious? Because I can imagine, like the rest of the offenders in this country, the sentence that he got will have been pitiful to start with, without him being released mistakenly early. I remember when they started the early release scheme, and I remember standing at the dispatch box questioning Shabana Mahmood about these people that were letting out, and she, oh no, there's all sorts of restrictions in place, this can't happen, oh, and everybody's going to be tagged. Then they let a lot of people out without tags, then they let a lot of the wrong people out, and now we're seeing foreign sex offenders running, not one, not two, like it's just a devastating. How many of these people are running around there that we don't know?
And what haven't we been told?
Directly asked.
And what haven't we been told? Are you going to call for him to resign? What are you going to do?
Do you know what? I'll let the public, if anybody sat at home hasn't watched the squirreling and the squirming and the avoidance of answers, the fact he can look people in the eye without telling them the information that is sat, the important, devastating information that is sat at his fingertips. Everybody who hasn't seen it, if they want to make a judgment about this government, should look at that. They should look at the facts that they now know he had, and look at what he had to say when he was questioned about them. It is utterly, it destroys all trust in politics. It destroys all trust in the government. It's absolutely devastating. Shameful day for Parliament today.
Matt, thank you. Appreciate that. Actually, sorry, just before you go, can I ask you just briefly about the Speaker? Because your colleague, James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, made what's called a point of order. You know what it is, I know what it is, but people sitting at home might not, because a sort of obscure bit of what happens in Parliament. He wasn't granted that. He basically put up his hand and said, hold on a second here, there should be more accountability for David Lammy. The Speaker didn't grant that point of order. What's your view on that?
You know what? There's scrutiny there. Did the Speaker know what he knew and what he was failing to tell us? Probably not, but there definitely needs to be answers tomorrow. The government's got questions to answer on this. How can the Deputy Prime Minister stand at the dispatch box, mislead the nation? I think it's fair to say mislead, new information, failed to share it with us, despite the fact he sat in the mother of all parliaments being asked questions. There are answers there are questions to be answered there. Okay. I hope the Prime Minister will come forward with a statement on that tomorrow.
OK, Matt, thank you. That's Matt Vickers, who's the Shadow Home Office Minister, the Conservative MP for Stockton West. Ian is in London, 03444991000, the number he's dialed. Ian, what do you make of this?
It's a question, Peter, because you maybe know where you are. Is this the same David Lammy who decides he's going to wear trainer shoes to go and meet the President of America?
Yes.
Is this the same David Lammy who, when he goes to sort of Israel to sort of meet the Foreign Office there, doesn't wear any sort of badge, but when he goes to see the pro-Palestinian ones, he wears a pro-Palestinian emblem flag on his thing, right? Now, I don't know about yourself, but you've worked in Parliament. I'm sure, because of what happened last week, he must have asked, is there any chance any other prisoners have been let go by accident that shouldn't have been let go? Now, I know I would have done that.
I'll tell you exactly what I would have done. I worked in the Ministry of Justice. I spent many, many hours in the office in the actual office where David Lammy has advising the then Justice Secretary a few years ago. I would have said, if there is even a hint, a sniff, a rumour that this has happened, I am your first phone call. You ring me and you ring the Justice Secretary and you tell us immediately that this has happened. And that is the protocol. I don't care where it is, I don't care what time of the day or night it is, ring me at 3 o'clock in the morning, you tell me this has happened, I will come into the office, the Justice Secretary will get into the office, and we will deal with this on an operational level ASAP and get that person back in and control it on a political level. Because what has happened here is that there's clearly many, many problems in the prison service, there are problems in the civil service as well, but there's a real problem of political judgment and grip with Lammy, and the fact that he had information literally sitting beside him on a piece of paper, and he chose not to tell us, Ian.
That's right, because he doesn't do it. As you say, the guy's got more arrogance about him. He doesn't work for this country. He didn't work for this country when it came to the Chagos Islands, when he was Foreign Secretary. He hasn't worked for this country when he starts saying you've got to do reparations of God knows how much money to everybody else. He doesn't care about this country. As much as he'll sort of bluster his way, he does his barrel chest, I'm working. He doesn't.
I'm the Deputy Prime Minister. When you've got to remind people that you're the Deputy Prime Minister, it's a bit like saying, you will obey me, you know, I am in control. Ian, I think we can agree there's probably one person and one thing that David Lammy does care about. David Lammy, stay with us here on Talk.
Is pretty shocking, isn't it? So the scenario is that governors have been told that if kids come up to you and go, oh look, I've got this video, I've got evidence that the rape gangs are primarily Pakistani men, Muslim men of Pakistani heritage, they're to be told that's disinformation, ignore it, and this is an online safety risk. It's not disinformation, it's true.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
We're going to talk about the scandal at the BBC in just a second with Caroline Dinage, who is chairwoman of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. But just before then, Caroline, I'd love to ask you just one question just about David Lammy in the House of Commons today. I expect you were there for Prime Minister's questions. I just wonder what your reaction is to the fact that he had the information at his fingertips but chose not to tell Parliament.
Yeah, I can't believe it, really. I mean, I sat there. His tone was very aggressive today, and it felt like he was obfuscating somewhat. But of course, at that time, those of us sitting in the chamber didn't have any information that he would have had, and to know that he had it and just repeatedly resisted the questions from James Cartledge to be able to come clean about it seems remarkable.
Yes, well, let's actually see a clip of what you very kindly joined us about, which is the BBC bosses who are under major, major pressure. There's more in this. There's a dismissive and defensive attitude when Oxford and Cambridge professors accuse the corporation of rewriting history to promote a woke agenda. There are calls from your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, that heads should rule for the Director General and senior executives following accusations of serious and systematic editorial bias. This all started 2 days ago when there was a clip of Donald Trump the BBC is accused of doctoring. Let's just have a look at this and then get into this in a second with you, Dame Caroline.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and, that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we fight. We fight like hell.
Dame Caroline, what is your committee going to do about this?
So, first of all, we've written to Samir Shah, the chair of the BBC, but he also chairs this the editorial guidelines and standards committee, which this was reported to. This document was handed to. So we've asked him a number of questions, and then we've also given them a deadline of Monday to reply to that, and including we want to see a copy of that memo ourselves. It was a 19-page memo that was prepared by Michael Prescott, who was formerly an independent advisor to that committee. But based upon information that the BBC had gathered for them by a gentleman called David Grossman. So he did all these reports at the committee's request, and then nothing happened. And so Michael gathered it together and presented it in a 19-page memo. So we've asked for a copy of the memo, we've asked a number of questions in a letter to the BBC, and then we've invited Mr Prescott to come and give evidence to our select committee, and he's agreed to come in next Wednesday morning to tell us himself the story behind this and the findings.
What do you think it says when our national broadcaster, to whom most people pay a licence fee, can allegedly doctor footage in the way we saw in the clip, can tell Oxford and Cambridge historians they're wrong about history, and can also report the Middle East in a way, certainly through BBC Arabic, which is not fair or impartial? Is this an organisation out of control? Should the Director General go?
Well, first of all, it feels like this is an organisation where there are really deep cultural issues all the way through. The BBC is our national broadcaster, and in a world where, I'm sure you'll agree that trust in media, trust in politics is at an all-time low, the BBC must be there to set the benchmark for accurate and fair reporting, especially in really, really contentious subjects. And the fact that they just don't appear to be treating these issues with the seriousness that they deserve, the fact that they don't appear to have taken the decisive steps that are really necessary to uphold that reputation for integrity and public trust is of deep concern. It's something that I know that the committee share my worry about.
And I believe Michael Prescott, from what I've read and heard already, is going to tell you, when you talk to him at your committee, the process of all of this, the nuts and bolts of who he raised this with. We have Deborah Turness, who's the head of BBC News, who told staff that it was important to make a distinction between Hamas, the politicians, and Hamas, the terrorists, when we know in this country both are prescribed and it's all one. I mean, when you switch on the telly at night, Caroline, do you trust the BBC?
Well, I think we all instinctively do, don't we? Because it's our national broadcaster, and we all.
Well, they can't rest on their laurels, can they? But especially when these scandals keep coming.
Exactly, and this is the big problem, and these stories seem to be coming out every day from this memo. As I say, we're waiting to try and get a copy of it to see what's going to be coming next. But whether it was the editing of a panorama show that you've just talked about, whether it was this BBC Arabic, which was giving a platform to journalists with a history of the most extreme anti-Semitic comments, I'm told there's more information now coming out about their reporting of transgender issues. And from one thing to another, there just seems to be problems, and that would be one thing if they were taking these allegations really seriously, if they were putting deep inquiries into every aspect, setting up working groups, putting in place the checks and balances, putting in place the training and a really strong action plan to address this stuff. But the only comment that's come out of the BBC so far is that it just takes feedback seriously and it considers everything carefully. I mean, that doesn't, I don't know about you, but that doesn't suggest to me.
Well, clearly Michael Prescott doesn't feel that is the case, and clearly you don't feel that is the case. What about the regulator in all of this? What about Ofcom?
Well, we're waiting to hear what Ofcom have decided to do. I mean, I think Ofcom, as a matter of principle, tend to have to act upon complaints. So if they receive complaints that have been made to the BBC and they don't feel that they've been satisfactorily dealt with, then they can act. I think that's pretty much the process that they're in. But, the fact is, as I understand it, Michael Prescott compiled this document based upon reports that were done at the behest of the BBC by David Grossman, who's a former Newsnight reporter. And then Jonathan Monroe, who is the news, one of the
very senior news executive,
senior news controller, then had to report back on the findings and and say what was going to happen. So it's not like this stuff is new or novel to the BBC. It's not like no one knew this memo that, and because Michael Prescott was so frustrated, he then compiled this 19-page memo of all the incidents that had been covered, and that's been presented to all the board members of the BBC, and yet we're still waiting to hear what action has taken place.
Let's talk again on this if we can. Thank you, Dame Caroline Dinenage, who is the chairwoman of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. She's also the Conservative MP for Gosport, so thank you to her. Stephen is in Cambridge and has given me a ring about David Lammy, 0344 499 1000. Stephen, what do you think?
Well, basically, Peter, knowing his take on Israel and his contempt for Donald Trump, how can he possibly be Deputy Prime Minister? I mean, if Keir Starmer's taken out the equation, he's got to go and sit in front of these people. If he can't answer a simple question in Parliament, how can he be trusted to represent us unbiasedly on the world stage?
It's a very, very good point, Stephen, and we've got to have some level of trust, at least in the competence of our politicians. You may disagree with them, you may think they're running the country badly, but you've got to be able to think, do you know what? If we're in a crisis, we need to be able to trust them to deal with it. I wouldn't trust David Lammy to run a bath.
No, mate, no, me exactly. And also, we've had the description of the fraudster that was released, and a full description and this, that, and the other. Why isn't there a picture on a social media or whatever of this other bloke that
Well,
was let out
we
early?
think we've got it now. It wasn't earlier on, but I think it's come out now, and we know that this...
6 days late?
Well, exactly. Well, it's a very fair point, and they didn't tell the police for 6 days. We do have that photo now. We've put it on the screen right there, Stephen. But listen, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate that. That's Stephen in Cambridgeshire. Loads of tweets coming in about this. Adam says, you're bang on about Starmer being better than Lammy at PMQs, and that's saying something. We already know his ability of answering questions from his spell in the big black chair. He's literally the biggest wally in the room. Absolutely useless. And the hashtag Adam has created is shalambles. I'm not sure that's going to catch on. There's always a tweet, says Philip. This is David Lammy tweeting some time ago. Last week, Boris Johnson's words had the effect of misleading the House. Now I'm asking for the government to correct the record. Well, I would like to see David Lammy back in Parliament tomorrow correcting the record. Angela says, if this released prisoner wasn't missed for days, it begs the question if the public are in real danger of a murderer being mistakenly released. The quality of prison staff needs to be investigated. I've heard that many don't have English as a first language. Well, listen, there are all sorts of problems with prison staff. What happened was, yes, under the Conservatives, they managed to pension off far too many of them. It's a really, really tricky, difficult job, and you can be blackmailed, you can be targeted in so many ways when you're a prison officer, and some of them are just corrupt. Some of them, often because they don't get paid a huge amount of money, will take money from criminal gangs and so on. Rob says, big-headed, arrogant, ignorant, tetchy, tantrum-prone, volatile, grossly impatient, massively incompetent, just a few of the many ways to describe Lammy after his appalling, totally inappropriate performance in the House today. John says, has it been confirmed the prisoner is an asylum seeker? No. He wasn't an asylum seeker, but he is a foreign migrant, so that is a slight difference there. He wasn't seeking asylum, but he shouldn't have been in this country. He was identified in 2020 as someone who should have been deported, and guess what? He wasn't. They said they're in the initial stages of deporting him. 5, nearly 6 years later. Steve says, today we saw the real Lammy. Perhaps the French taxi driver was correct when he gave his description of the verbal attack by Lammy. Also, Christine says, Lammy, isn't there a rule for PMs not misleading Parliament? Yes, he should go back and correct the record tomorrow, Christine, absolutely. Hasn't Lammy just misled Parliament? Yes. When will we have a simple rule that MPs must give an answer that satisfies the MP who asked the question? I'm so fed up of this lying government, says Christine, hashtag Labour out. And on Jane Moore, Mr. Chaz says, Peter, I love you dearly, but please pronounce your surname correctly. Moore in England rhymes with more. Moore. Well, listen, I'm from Northern Ireland and I have a different accent, so there we are, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose the way we pronounce Moore is a bit different, but nonetheless, we're as valid members of the UK population as you are. Philip says, the Times now reporting that David Lammy was told about the second accidental migrant offender release on Tuesday night. He knew and lied to the House, says Philip. Well, he withheld information, not quite the same thing, but it's lying by omission, I would argue. And Debbie says, Lammy is a despicable person and should be setting a standard, but why are we surprised? He only cares about those outside the UK and not about those who fought for king and country. Great show, Peter. And one more from Tad, who says, it is an ill wind that blows no one any good. The election of the Mayor of New York teaches us in microcosm how dangerous these lefties are. This is what we expect if we continue to naively vote for creatures of the left. The freedom-loving people have a duty to expose it, to highlight it, and to relentlessly condemn it, says Tad. And actually, I think I have one as well from Jason in the Lake District on David Lammy, who says the lunatics have taken over the asylum like never before. Thank goodness the grown-ups are in charge. Well, I think your tongue is firmly in your cheek there, Jason. More of this nonsense coming up. We'll examine this further. We'll also talk about Bonfire Night tonight and what the fire service say about fireworks, about your animals, about making sure that you stay safe. This is really important stuff. Remember, it is the 5th of November. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including on Mondami, who is, of course, the new mayor of New York. And thanks to the Woodstack on Twitter, who says the reference to BBC News' coverage of the New York mayor. The early morning presenter referred to the new mayor as left-leaning, which says everything we need to know. He is a radical socialist. He is a far-left person. That is what the new mayor of New York is, and that is absolutely true. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more on David Lammy in a second. We're also going to talk about the sport very soon as well. But in the meantime, I want to speak to Richard Field, who is Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade. Richard, thank you for joining me this evening. Hopefully it will be a quiet night for you and your officers, but I fear it will not. What would your appeal be to people on the 5th of November, celebrating Guy Fawkes Night, maybe going to a bonfire, maybe letting off some fireworks? What would you say to them?
Well, you're absolutely right. This is one of the busiest years for the fire service. Last year we attended 690 calls this evening, and the year before it was significantly less. We are urging people not to have displays in their garden, but consider going to an organised display where it's far safer, proper risk assessments are done, there's staff on site. We don't want anybody to get injured this evening.
What kind of stuff are you dealing with? Why is it worse?
Well, what we are seeing is individuals not following the manufacturer's instructions, not following the guidelines set out by the London Fire Brigade or the Fireworks Code, using fireworks really inappropriately, holding them in the air, setting them off, aiming them at premises, they're inside of buildings. So we've seen online quite some dangerous behaviour. So we're asking people, please consider that what you're using is an explosive, and we would like you to think that what you're doing is quite dangerous. Follow the manufacturer's instructions and please act responsibly. We're urging people to go to an organised display.
I am a big animal person, Richard. I have a cat who gets very scared when there are fireworks going off. From the fire brigade's perspective, what advice would you give, and what have you seen in your experience in regard to keeping animals safe in this regard as well, especially with fireworks going off all over the place?
Yes, I mean, animals do get scared. Our advice is to keep them inside, but also consider your neighbours, consider the vulnerable people in your community, and stop using fireworks late in the evening after 11 p.m.
Yeah, and also from your perspective, I mean, you've got the other fires going on. You've got your sort of day job to do as well. How much extra pressure is there this particular night, or is it this whole season? And presumably it's the case at New Year and so on as well.
Well, this is one of our busiest times of year, so we're asking people to act responsibly, go to an organised display, so then we can respond to real emergencies in the community.
Okay, Richard, all the very, very best to you and the brave firemen and firewomen of London, and indeed right across the UK. I hope you have as quiet a night as possible, and wish you well for that. And thanks for keeping us all safe and the service of the Fire Brigade. You do a great job. That's Richard Field there, who is Deputy Assistant Commissioner of London Fire Brigade. On David Lammy, lots of people getting in touch. Let's hear Jan's voice note.
I'm absolutely flabbergasted. I cannot believe that another 2 have been released by mistake. How many more do we not know about? That's my concern. I'm scared rotten for my grandchildren and my children and myself. We have a concert to go to up in London. I don't want to go anymore. I'm too scared to get on a train. I'm too scared to walk to work. This government has got to go. They are totally incompetent.
Jan, I'm so sorry to hear you feel that way. Please go to that concert. Please do not let this incompetence and these people and the incompetence of the government stop you from living your life and enjoying your life as well. We cannot be scared. It's so sad, and it's easy for me to say. I've never been mugged, thank goodness. I'm a big bloke and maybe people don't prey on me, and I haven't been a victim of that sort of crime anyway. But and it's clearly different for women. I totally understand that. But Jan, I really, really want you to go to that concert. I want you to enjoy yourself. I want you to have a good life. I don't want you to fear all the time, as so many people do. Damon's been in touch as well on released prisoners.
The same question keeps cropping up. Do you feel safe in Britain? How safe do you feel in the United Kingdom? How the hell can you feel safe in the United Kingdom when stories like this keep coming out? And seriously, I'm so wound up. What the hell is going on with Wandsworth and the justice system? There's something seriously wrong somewhere. There's a complete breakdown in communication. And at the end of the day, if these who keep being released go on to commit further offences and maybe stab somebody or maybe murder somebody, who's to be held accountable then? Because this is an absolute shambles, and they wonder why no British public feels safe.
Damon, all fair points. Rafi's been in touch and says Algeria runs a much tighter ship than Britain. No prisoner would slip through the cracks there due to sheer incompetence. Another person says you're spending too long on Lammy. The fella's a thuggish oaf. Everyone knows that. It's not news. Listening today, it sounds, Peter, as if you have a very personal axe to grind. Most unlike you, if I may say so. This isn't about me not liking David Lammy. I mean, I think he's competent. I don't have like a personal animus towards him in any way. I don't think I've ever actually met him. The point is that he is the Justice Secretary and he's not doing basic functions of his job. David Lammy explained clearly today at PMQs the truth of the matter. He's been in Parliament for 25 years and has the arrogance to boot. The only thing he is bothered about is what happens in the House and has nothing but contempt for the public. They don't matter. James says, if I performed this badly in my job, I would be sacked. Philip says, in the past 24 hours, David Lammy has been embarrassed by a French judge. He threw out his incoherent accusations against a taxi driver, caught lying 5 times in Parliament about mistakenly released prisoners, and forgotten to wear a poppy at PMQs. Not his day, is it? Very, very fair point. Graham in Kent has some thoughts on this and has given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Graham, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter, it's nice to speak to you. I'm one of your disabled customers. I got blood clots working too hard at a computer, can hardly walk now. I'm telling you that because I've been looking at Prime Minister's question times. I see that Lammy has misled the House. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I don't like the guy at all. I think he's very tricky. But the other thing I've been watching is that Keir Starmer treating jokes and making jokes. I watch it to see democracy in action. I expect them to be held to account and with decent questions. I ask you, because you've got a lot of knowledge of Parliament, why is it that Hoyle gives people the right to say, if you come down to my constituency, we've got a breakfast club here. Isn't that one? These are wasted questions.
Yeah, completely agree.
I think Hoyle is very... I know he's not as bad as the other guy, but Hoyle is biased to the Labour Party, and I think I want to see more discussion, democratic discussion, and I want Starmer and Lammy and the other, all these other people, Bridget Phillipson and people like that, held to account for what they're doing.
Listen, Graham, first of all, I think all of that makes sense. I'm sorry to hear about your mobility problems. I mean, what I think actually happened today, and Grant has been in touch and said if James Cartledge, the Conservative, knew of the prisoner being released, why did he not ask that question directly, would have also meant he could have had 4 more digs about that and other things right after, even if Lammy had a statement lined up in case it was asked. Grant, I actually think James Cartledge did hold the government to account today, and by asking that question over and over, we have... it's been very clear that he knew something about it. He may not have known the whole thing. So, Graham, just to go back to you, holding people to account, I actually think that happened to some degree. We are now holding David Lammy to account. Graham, what do you think should happen now?
I think he's got to go. I honestly do think he's got to go. He's used foul language in the past about people. I think he loses control. I think he's a bad example of a government minister. But can I ask you another question? Why isn't Kemi Badenoch around? All right, I understand that Starmer's out of the country, he always is. But why isn't she around? Because she must have smelt blood in the water on this, and I don't understand why James Cartledge was allowed to take it on.
Well, in fairness, the convention is that you have someone, a deputy or someone standing in. But it's a fair point, actually, and maybe they should change that. Just Graham on Kemi Badenoch, she put a tweet out and said, James Cartledge asked the Deputy Prime Minister 5 times to tell us if another migrant sex offender had been accidentally released from prison. Instead of answering, Lammy lost his temper. Now we read this. It has happened again, and he's been on the run for a week. This is a shambles of a government. I would imagine, Graham, you'll be hearing a lot more from Kemi Badenoch about this, especially if David Lammy is forced to go to the House of Commons tomorrow to apologise and correct the record, which I think he has to do. Lots more on this. We'll take your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. We'll also hear a little bit about the sport. Dean Scoggins is going to give us that in just a second.
Muslims, we can't be anti-Semitic. Did you know that? Because
well, no offense, not you, but a lot of your Muslim friends, I think.
Our prophet was a Semitic.
So so you're telling me that Muslims cannot be anti-Semitic, that it's part of your sacred creed?
Muslims cannot be against any religion. We are taught to coexist with peace and harmony with every religion.
Well, it's not really working out, is it? Particularly, shall we say, in Gaza.
Why not?
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good point from Mark in Coventry, just talking about safety tonight, the 5th of November. One thing you should mention is if you have a bonfire, move the pile before you light it. This time of year, hedgehogs will use a built pile of wood, etc. as a home. We certainly don't want to burn hedgehogs to death. Absolutely want to avoid that for our furry and indeed spiky friends. Someone says, can someone please identify something this government is actually in control of? And another person says, Lammy needs to be reported to parliamentary standards. He lied to Parliament. He needs to go. Well, listen, this has been a very, very busy show, and if you missed any of the show this evening, you can now listen back to all the highlights on a brand new podcast, the Talk Drive podcast. It's about half an hour. It's the highlights of the show, the top guests, all the things you need. If you've managed to miss some of it, maybe you're just getting in the car now and you think, well, actually what went on earlier, well, you can download the Talk Drive podcast. It's available from all your favourite podcast apps straight after the show, so you can download that. Lots to discuss about Lammy, but let's now talk about the sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Mike Anstead is the sport head of content at The Sun. Hi, Mike, how are you doing?
Evening, Peter. Yeah, very good, thank you.
It's been a more positive month, of course, for Manchester United and their manager, Ruben Amorim. He's discussed possible transfer targets with his director of football, Jason Wilcox. Who are they going to target, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. So Jason Wilcox, who's director of football, has come out today and said they don't want what he describes as a Harlem Globetrotters signing. I think what he's saying in football terms there is Galactico signings, which we link with Real Madrid, which is basically sign any number of superstars and hope they fall together and form a team. At Manchester United, when they've done that, it's failed in the last 10 years since Ferguson. When we look at a number of signings like Alexis Sanchez, Bastian Schweinsteiger, those kind of players. So we know Man United are interested in Adam Wharton, Carlos Baleba, Elliot Anderson, but what those three players show us are they're quite industrious, hard-working, sensible players. So that's what he's pointing at. We need more of these type of players to make us successful. And forget the bright lights. We need these good players coming in and improving us.
Liverpool has had a big win last night in the Champions League against Real Madrid. Good for them. It was only 1-0, but the Reds have said they're learning from the current league leaders Arsenal. What has left-back Andy Robertson said?
So Liverpool had a bit of a mad season. Absolutely flew out the blocks, winning all their games. Some of the games absolutely crazy. You know, they were conceding 3, scoring 4. He's making the point after this one, we need to be... He doesn't quote Arsenal, but let's be honest, he's talking about Arsenal. We need more 1-0s. He says it's not sustainable to be conceding 2-3 goals a game and still expect us to win. That's going to be no way to win a title. So let's be more 1-0 to the Arsenal. So 1-0 to Liverpool, and he thinks that's going to be the ingredient to be successful. Whether that means they finish above Arsenal in the Premier League. I mean, Arsenal have only conceded 3 goals in 16 games this season, 8 clean sheets in a row. Good luck catching them. But, you know, starting point being Real Madrid 1-0.
Tomorrow night there's a big story for sport. It's a big story for news as well. There's going to be something like 700 police officers in Birmingham. This is the much talked about Aston Villa versus Maccabi Tel Aviv taking place at Villa Park. Huge police operation. What's the latest from your perspective?
So look, this has been coming. This has been teed up for a long time now, ever since the away fans were banned from Villa Park, the Israeli side's fans, which has caused a huge uproar. It was the decision was originally made by the safety group because of previous incidents. It's too much of a high-risk game. We're banning fans. Obviously, that caused huge uproar. There's now protests planned outside the game tomorrow night, even though away fans aren't allowed in. So I expect there's going to be far more action away from the pitch than on it. We know today that some of the schools around Villa Park are closing early. There's a huge ethnically diverse area around Villa Park. There's obviously going to be pro-Palestinian protesters turning up. There could be counter-protests by pro-Israeli supporters as well. So, look, I'm not going to sit here and speculate what's going to happen, but we're aware there's going to be a kind of scene tomorrow night.
Yeah.
700 police is a lot of police to have at a game. I think, you know, an average Premier League game would probably be around 100 police officers. So having 700 tells you everything you need to know. So it's a powder keg kind of night tomorrow night in Birmingham, and you know, let's see what happens.
Will Aston Villa have to pay for those police officers, or how will that work? Do you know?
Well, quite often when you have increased police presence at a game, the club is often asked to contribute towards that, and it's actually, there's been lots of incidents down the years where police have said, well, hold on a minute, we can't afford to do that, or clubs are we're not willing to pay it. Obviously, this has become a political hot potato anyway, and has it actually spiralled into something more than it needed to be because of the original decision. But look, yeah, it's a difficult one.
We are going to have full coverage of that tomorrow. It's going to be a big element of Talk Drive tomorrow. In fact, our reporter Nick Ellerby is going to be at Villa Park, and we'll be talking to him about that. And the big question I would ask from a news perspective rather than a sports perspective is, where is the threat coming from? Is it coming from Islamism, or is it coming from people who are Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, or even people who are just worried about anti-Semitism in this country, which is a really, really, really big issue and a growing issue. We'll be doing it from a number of angles tomorrow, talking about this story. For the meantime, Mike Anstead, Sports Head of Content at The Sun, thank you for joining me in the studio. Really appreciate that. Lots of great. Oh, this is great. This message is brilliant. Ryan's just put it on the screen here. Remember the 5th of November, the day that Lammy lost the plot. Bob, you win. You win Wednesday. That is very, very good. Ian in Essex says, I'm so pleased that would never hear Keir leaves the country and leaves it in the hands of Lammy. Now we see how good the number 2 is. Just imagine what's behind him, who would turn up without a poppy this week. Total contempt for this country, says Ian in Essex. David says the Home Secretary must have known as well. Well, if the police were only told on Tuesday, yeah, in theory, you're right, Shabana Mahmood, you would hope anyway that she would be briefed on this shambles as well. Steve says Labour really is the gift that keeps on giving, and not in a good way. Another person says, to be honest, as a veteran, it's actually more of an insult that Lammy would wear a poppy when he really doesn't want to. They don't like veterans. Look at their behaviour around Soldier F. Simon says, do you think poor Lammy forgot where he was today? He couldn't answer the questions. It's like a rerun of Mastermind. Then he got as angry as if he was in a French taxi. Simon, you're clearly a man who has watched David Lammy on Celebrity Mastermind. As I said, I used to work in the Ministry of Justice Special Advisor for 6 months, and I had the great pleasure of telling someone very, very senior in the Ministry of Justice, sending them that YouTube link of David Lammy on Celebrity Mastermind, where he was asked certain questions as the Higher Education Minister at the time, such as Marie and Pierre Watt discovered radium, to which he replied, Antoinette. He was also asked about French cheeses, which French cheese, to which he said, Red Leicester. And he was asked who succeeded Henry VIII, and his answer was Henry VII. Now, he is now the Deputy Prime Minister and the Justice Minister, Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor, so whether people can now legitimately ask questions about how well the prisons are run under him, I think is a very, very important point. It's one we're going to return to in just a second when we come back after the break. Peter Bleksley is joining us. I don't think he's going to miss and hit the wall. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. You join us on the day. We had a texter a minute ago. He said, remember the 5th of November, the day Lammy lost the plot. And I think you may well be right. The Deputy Prime Minister having at his fingertips a piece of paper with the truth on it about what was happening about a prisoner who'd been released by mistake, doesn't tell the House of Commons despite repeated questions from the Conservatives. Then a few hours later, the news comes out that yet another prisoner has been released from the same prison who shouldn't have been. In fact, the second prisoner was given a 45-month sentence that day and was released that day. What on earth is going on? It's been barely 2 weeks since Hadish Kabatu was let out, the sex offender who they eventually caught. And in the case of today's main prisoner, the Algerian migrant, well, actually, the police weren't even told for 6 days that he had been released mistakenly. It's a shambles. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Britain's sick note system facing an overhaul and why politics is good for your health. We're also going to find out what is in the Sun tomorrow. I would imagine Calamity Lammy will be on the front page. I'd be surprised if he isn't. We're also going to speak to Peter Blexley in just a second. I also want to talk to you about all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please. Send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk Drive. And remember, if you miss any of the show this evening, you can now listen back to all the highlights on a new podcast. The Talk Drive podcast is available from all your favourite podcast apps straight after the show. So let's go back a bit. In PMQs today, the Deputy Prime Minister was filling in for Keir Starmer, who isn't on one of his rare visits to the UK. So David Lammy was at PMQs, defending his own department, he's Justice Secretary as well, after being pressed to apologise over the accidental release of a convicted sex offender. This is what happened initially when James Cartledge, who is from the Conservatives, he was standing in for Kemi Badenoch, said essentially very quickly, Hadish Kabatu was released. He sexually assaulted 2 people, including a 14-year-old girl. Have you, Justice Secretary David Lammy, lifted the phone, spoken to that girl or her family? Yes or no? This is what David Lammy said.
After his release, I put in place the toughest checks we've ever had in the prison system. It is important that Lynn Owens is able to get to the bottom of her work. I suspect there'll be more checks and balances we need to do. What we inherited was a complicated system that they set up, letting people out on the sly. That's part of the problem, and we're trying to fix it.
David Lammy getting even angrier as time went on. And then in the 5 extra questions, so as the opposition, you have 6 questions. So first one was about Hadish Kabatu's victim. Did you lift the phone to talk to her or her family? No, was the answer, in that angry answer from David Lammy. But then the Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge pressed David Lammy on whether any other migrant prisoners might have been released in error.
He's the Justice Secretary. He's responsible for the justice system. He needs to take responsibility, and I'm asking him a straight question. And I'm going to repeat it once more for the avoidance of doubt, because he didn't answer it twice. He's here to answer questions. Can he reassure the House that since Kabatu was released, no other asylum-seeking offender has been accidentally let out of prison? It's a clear question. Can he give an answer?
So what we now know was at this moment, Lammy did know that another foreign prisoner had been released by mistake. He also knew that that person was identified in 2020 as someone who should be deported. We now know from the Home Office they're in the initial stages of deporting that person when they find him, but it's taken nearly 6 years to get to that point. So Lammy knew all this. He knew he'd been released in error. He knew the police hadn't been told for 6 days. He knew his own officials in the Ministry of Justice had been working overnight to try to sort it out. He had a piece of paper inches away from him with all the details, a statement he could have very easily made to the House of Commons. Instead, this is what he did.
In 25 years in this House, I've not witnessed a more shameful spectacle, frankly, than what the party opposite left in our justice system. Their criminal negligence on his watch as a former Justice Minister. They left our prisons on the brink of collapse entirely, threatening to allow offenders to run wild on our streets. He knows that. Rape victims waiting years for their day in court. He knows that. Neighbourhood policing decimated, leaving our people feeling unsafe in their communities, and they haven't learned a thing.
Well, towards the end of Prime Minister's questions, the news broke that this person, this migrant, had been let out. This fugitive Algerian migrant sex offender had accidentally been released from Wandsworth Prison. His name is Brahim Kader Sharif. The Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary knew that. He knew that. He had a piece of paper in front of him. He'd been briefed on it the night before, last night. So, at the end of Prime Minister's questions, James Cartledge tried to raise it with the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, put his hand up and basically said, a point of order here, actually, he knew about it, he didn't tell us. The Speaker dismissed him. Lammy scuttled off out of the House of Commons, and then he puts out a statement saying, I'm absolutely outraged and appalled by the mistaken release of a foreign criminal wanted by the police. The Metropolitan Police is leading an urgent manhunt, and my officials have been working through the night to take him back to prison. David Lammy knew and didn't tell the House of Commons what was going on. He said he'd been in 25 years as a veteran MP, in 25 years in Parliament. He hadn't seen anything as bad as the Conservatives were accusing him of. Well, actually, should he have a 26th year in Parliament, especially having at the very least withheld, if not lied, to Parliament? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Well, I know, like you, there's the opinion of one man I want on this, our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley. Peter, shambles doesn't begin to cover it.
David Lammy seems to have a very strange relationship with the truth, in my opinion. He clearly knew that this Algerian prisoner, a convicted sex offender, a man who'd been wanted on many levels, breach of his sex offender register conditions, breach of probation, and there's more, clearly a danger to the public. Lammy knew he was on the run, having been mistakenly released from prison. So to stand there and have the brass neck not to tell the truth tells us really what we all know about so many politicians. They put votes before victims. They're more concerned about spin and perception than they are about keeping the streets safe. And a government's primary role, it's what it's there for, is to keep its citizens safe. And on multiple levels, Lammy and this government are manifestly failing.
Brass neck is absolutely right. And in fact, he looked at James Cartledge, who had been a Justice Minister previously in the Conservative administration, and said they had failed rape victims. Well, there were clearly victims of sex attacks that David Lammy's officials and prison system was failing because of this, and he knew, and he must have known this was going to come out. It's bizarre behaviour. It really is very, very strange. There's so much detail that he knew and didn't tell us, even though he knew it was coming pretty soon. It's just very odd. And then a few hours later, HMP Wandsworth, which, I mean, isn't fit for purpose, tells us again that actually 2 days ago, another prisoner was released by mistake. William Smith, who's 35 years old. He was described as white, bald and clean shaven. He was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences at Croydon Crown Court. And then on the same day, he was released. This is a prison that Daniel Khalif was managed to escape from. Lots of questions about that. And where a female prison officer was filmed having sex with a male prisoner. What's going on, Peter?
It's clearly in a chaotic state, and it's a very old Victorian prison. It's crumbling, it's rat infested, it's appalling. But let's just focus on Smith, the other prisoner, mistakenly released, if we may. He was convicted of fraud, so not a crime of violence. But to give you some indicator of the severity of his offending, for a non-violent crime of fraud, he got 45 months, nearly 4 years in prison. So his level of offending must be repeated and serious. And he is now out there on the streets instead of starting his sentence. What a basic error that the message gets sent that he's got a suspended sentence. No, no, no. He got a substantive prison sentence, not a suspended sentence. Utterly appalling, the state of our criminal justice system, from policing at the very front end, through to the Crown Prosecution Service, underfunded, underperforming, through to the courts, crumbling roofs, rubbish IT, courts sitting empty because there aren't the judges, then to the prisons, which we're focusing on today, and then to probation at the very far end of that system. It's all chaos, and consequently criminals are on the streets who shouldn't be, and we are all in a bit more danger.
Do you think David Lammy's worked out he's actually in government and actually responsible? I just want to read you another piece of this statement. Victims deserve better and the public deserve answers. I mean, you've quite literally just been questioned 5 times to provide basic answers to the House of Commons, which the public watch, and have failed to do so. And then you have the brass neck, that phrase again, saying victims deserve better and the public deserve answers. That is why I've already brought in the strongest checks ever to clamp down on such failures and ordered an independent investigation led by Dame Lynn Owens to uncover what went wrong and address the rise in accidental releases, which has persisted for far too long and is persisting under his watch as Justice Secretary.
So let's just examine how those strongest checks ever are going.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I mean,
exactly,
really,
exactly.
It just goes to show it's nonsense. He has not got a grip, and it is so disrespectful to victims to not tell the truth when he had it at his fingertips that he could have done now. What about the victims of this 24-year-old Algerian? How are they feeling now, knowing that he's out on the street? And the Metropolitan Police have very recently put out an image of him being arrested in September. What if his victims
I'm not
see that? What do they think?
I'm not sure he cares, Peter, because he was asked a reasonable question about Hadish Kabatu's victim, that 14-year-old who was sexually assaulted in her school uniform. He was asked a reasonable question: have you picked up the phone? Have you spoken to her or her family? And then he gets really irate about that. You know, he says he cares about victims. He says victims deserve better. Wouldn't it have been a reasonable human thing to do for the Justice Secretary to say, even if he says it's not his fault, even if he says, look, there were systematic failures, this was a dreadful thing, I'm terribly sorry, I just want to pick up the phone. This isn't on camera, this isn't a media opportunity, this isn't me, David Lammy, showing off. It's just me being a decent human being and taking some responsibility and also giving a bit of human compassion. But my impression of David Lammy is if the camera's not on him and he isn't looking good, he doesn't care.
Instead, we get contemptuous treatment of victims, appalling attitude towards the man and woman on the street, the man and women who become victims of crime. And do you know what? He is such a vainglorious oaf that at the opening of PMQs today, he was talking about having bought a new suit this morning. These people and their craven lust for power, image, expensive suits. It applies to so many of them, and they are not the best of us, as we would expect to have those people running the country. They should be the best of us. Instead, we get Lammy, Starmer, Hermer et al. No wonder this country's a mess.
And he was mentioning, and so focused on how he looked and his new suit, that he forgot to put a poppy on. He was past a poppy halfway through to pin on his lapel by Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. Later on, when asked about this, the Prime Minister's spokesman pointed to Mr Lammy opening PMQs with a tribute to veterans and the fallen on, ahead of Remembrance Day. That is, of course, the 11th, and Remembrance Sunday we will be marking here. Mr Lammy said, this weekend is Remembrance Sunday. We will never forget those who fought to defend our freedom. Wouldn't it have been a good idea to remember them by the small inconvenience of remembering to wear a poppy?
Well, that was clearly beyond David Lammy. Like, it appears something else that is beyond him is actually holding down office and having that department perform effectively, whether it's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which he got swiftly booted out of, or now the underperforming, almost joke criminal justice system.
What should happen now, Peter?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when politicians fell on their swords as a matter of honour. Something had happened on their watch. They took responsibility for it. It all seems like a very, very long time ago. The criminal justice system, as I laid out a few minutes ago, is in absolute crisis from front end to back end. Something needs to be done. But I fear that politicians will once again put the economy as their priority. They're not really concerned about you and I. If they were, they would have stopped the boats a long time ago. They would have smashed the gangs. They would have declared a state of emergency, I would suggest, so that particular new measures could have brought in to stop the flood of people illegally entering this country. And they would focus on the criminal justice system and get the brightest and the best in there to sort it out. But when we talk about brightest and best, perhaps we ought to swerve the Labour Party.
Peter, it's always good to talk to you. It's always good to get your take, especially on these big developing stories. There's so much common sense that you have. I know you're offering that common sense to people in local theatres on a tour. Just tell us a little bit about that.
8th of January, my 2026 tour starts, doing 140 venues, the length and breadth of the country. Please come and see me. Go to peterblexley.com for tickets.
Excellent stuff. Peter Blexley, our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective, and you can go on his website, peterblexley.com, to find out more information about his tour. Lots more to come. We'll continue talking about Lamy, of course. We'll talk about that and how the Sun is covering it as well. We'll also talk about another big story in just a second. Britain's sick note system facing an overhaul in a bid to tackle the $212 billion a year cost of people signed off work. That's £1 million a person. Also news that politics is good for your health. Hasn't been good for my blood pressure today, let me tell you. Plenty to come here on Talk.
Muslims, we can't be anti-Semitic. Did you know that? Because
well, no offense, not you, but a lot of your Muslim friends, I think.
Our prophet was a Semitic.
So so you're telling me that Muslims cannot be anti-Semitic? That it's part of your sacred creed?
Muslims cannot be against any religion. We are taught to coexist with peace and harmony with every religion.
Well, it's not really working out, is it? Particularly, shall we say, in Gaza.
Why not?
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good point, and thank you to Amy, who has messaged me to let me know and reminded me. I actually knew this earlier today and completely went out of my head. Parliament is actually now in recess, or will rise this evening until Tuesday. They have a short recess, so actually if David Lammy is to correct the record, it will be next Tuesday when he does that. So Amy, thank you for that, and maybe with David Lammy we will have that reply. Or that announcement. Stephen Swinford, who is the political editor of The Times, he's always got his finger on the pulse. I've been looking at what he has been reporting about this. He's exclusive after exclusive on this. Stephen says, I'm told the Metropolitan Police would have had absolutely no issue with David Lammy confirming the accidental release of a migrant sex offender from jail at PMQs. There was no operational issue, and indeed there is precedent for the prison service making announcements about the accidental release of prisoners rather than the police. So Lammy sort of said, well, I didn't do it because the Metropolitan Police should have done it and I didn't want to do it. Stephen says there is significant frustration in the Met Police that Lammy appears to be using them as an excuse for failing to disclose what he knew about the release of the convicted sex offender at Prime Minister's questions. This comes on top of the disquiet we're picking up in government, says Stephen Swinford, the Times political editor, about Lammy's refusal to respond to questions at the dispatch box. Really interesting from Di as well, who says, today was a sad day for Britain. This complete numpty of a Justice Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, has made a complete mockery of our revered Parliament with the whole world watching. Not only has he deliberately and knowingly broken the ministerial code, in Di's opinion, he's been caught red-handed and needs to step down. Also, he was allowed on 6 occasions to totally refuse to answer questions from Her Majesty's opposition. How is democracy supposed to work if we have dishonest ministers? Sir Lindsay Hoyle should have done a better job as Speaker. His left-wing bias becomes more and more apparent as time goes on, in Di's opinion. I think Lindsay Hoyle, I think the jury's out on Lindsay Hoyle. I think some things he's done have been very good. On this occasion, I think he failed today. I want to talk about another really big story, which we would have probably spoken a lot more about this evening had the Calamity Lammy not been our main story. This is Britain's sick note system. It's facing an overhaul in a bid to tackle the £212 billion a year cost of people signed off work. That's about £1 million a person for people signed off work. The Work and Pension Secretary Pat McFadden says there's a case for some change amid fears too many people are declared unfit for work too easily. I just want to make absolutely clear to anyone watching and listening who is genuinely disabled, receives benefits, even things like personal independence payment. I have absolutely no problem with my taxes going to that. If you're genuinely disabled, if you need that money, that's fine. No issue. We're not getting at you. We're not victimising people who are signed off work. We're talking about the fact that the sick note system itself isn't working. There's a big review that has been done by Sir Charlie Mayfield, and he says GPs are being asked to do two things: access health and decide if someone can work, which he says is very difficult in a 10-minute consultation. So access health and also decide if someone can work. Lucy Beresford is a psychotherapist and broadcaster who is with me now. Lucy, mental health is clearly a very, very big aspect of this. I wonder, in your opinion, whether we need to be more, well, we certainly need to be more aware of mental health. We need to be aware of how it has an impact on the system. But actually, as someone myself who has had mental health issues, coming to work helps me. And if I'd been signed off work, at times I probably could have been, it actually wouldn't have helped me. It would have been the opposite of that. What do you think of this major, major problem, a hugely expensive problem, and how the government gets a grip on it?
Well, as you say, it's a very expensive problem for the government, and that's very tragic for the government and also for people who pay taxes, and we gather those taxes might be going up at the end of the month. But far more worrying for me is the impact that this has on individuals, because work itself provides three very important psychological pillars. One of those is structure, the other is purpose, and the third is connection. And if you lack those three things, it can actually make it even harder for you to recover from some of your diagnosis, whether that's a mental health problem or a physical problem. And we know that the pandemic in general and the lockdown specifically dealt a very severe blow to people's mental health and well-being. And unfortunately, there were many people who really struggled during that and have taken a lot of time to recover. But the system, as you say, plays into the hands of people who think, actually, I would be better off not working. Commuting was too difficult. I didn't like my colleagues. I didn't get a sense of satisfaction from my job. And they think that there is no point in going back. Whereas actually what I would argue, and you were saying there in your introduction, is that work can actually provide you with things that are way more beneficial than actually just signing someone off, maybe giving them a prescription for some medication and hoping for the best. Because what the Mayfield report is showing really dramatically is that there are far too many people who are going down a spiral. They are signed off work and they never go back. And we just can't allow that to happen.
You're absolutely right. And if people can work, they should work. So what should the government do about it? Because it's a big, clunky system. It's one that doesn't work currently. And as I say, I've no problem with people who can't work getting benefits, but there are people who could be working who don't. We've also seen, something I bang on about quite a lot, the whole nature of work has changed to a huge degree over the pandemic lockdowns, over the last 5 years. There are people who can work maybe a few hours a day, or something like, I mean, I've said this before, but my best friend has multiple sclerosis. Sometimes she could work a whole day. Sometimes she could do a few hours. Sometimes she could do nothing at all because she can't get out of bed. But it varies every day. And I think the flexibility that's been shown to so many workers, usually in offices, yes, usually not in those jobs where you're standing on your feet all day, but nonetheless, there can be a flexibility here, and I'm not sure the system can actually take that on board. What do you think, Lucy?
Well, quite a lot of this is about the place of employment. And as you say, if you've got an enlightened employer or employee, sort of a system, a workplace, where they can understand and be responsive to the individual needs of the people that are working there, then you've got a much happier workforce. And employee assistance programs in some of the very big organizations are brilliant at making sure that you're not signed off, but actually you're more encouraged to come back. But that does come from the top. What we discover is that if you're in an organization, and it could actually be a very small retail organization, it could just be a one-off store, but if you're working for somebody who can really understand what you're going through and can make adjustments to your workload or for your schedule, you are going to retain that workforce. So it isn't just about what the government can do, although the Mayfield report is very clear that actually the government should be perhaps creating incentives within business to actually make it possible for them to have a more flexible workforce.
And there are so many people who want to employ people who have some form of disability or mental health issue, but that's just become so much more difficult because of the national insurance issue in the last year. I want to ask you about something else, Lucy. I'm sure you, like me, every time it's out, read the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health from cover to cover, and there has been research in it that says that people who don't vote are significantly more likely to die earlier than their voting peers. Experts suggesting voting behaviour is a stronger determinant of health than education. What do you make of this?
Well, the only thing that I could link that to is a sense of apathy and joylessness, that there's something quite there needs to be a sense of motivation for people to get out and vote. And if your overall view of life is that it doesn't really matter, my vote doesn't count, my voice doesn't count, I'm worthless, you might be signalling that someone has other issues around sense of self-esteem and their ability to get joy out of life, which might correlate, is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence from me, which might correlate to their inability or unwillingness to go out and vote. But yeah, causation and correlation are two very different things.
It is a very interesting study. Just while I have you, Lucy, I would have loved to have asked you this at the time, but I don't think our schedule's quite matched, about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I think we tried to get you on, it didn't quite work with our schedules, but I'd love to ask you just one question about someone who clearly his self-esteem has taken a bit of a knock. What is life psychologically going to be like for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor at the moment?
It is actually going to be extremely tough because he hasn't just lost the trappings and perhaps the income and the status, he's actually lost his identity. Stripping those titles from him was very much part of who he felt he was. And when that happens, and it can happen to any of us really, if you lose your job, if you have to have a sudden change in your career, perhaps even if you get divorced, if you break up, this sense of who you are and your place in the world and your place in society undergoes a really radical rethink. And you do need a lot of resilience to be able to confront that. I've worked with a lot of people, for example, who had a vision that they wanted to have a particular career, maybe as an athlete, maybe as a musician, maybe as a designer. And something happened, something went wrong, and they had to put that dream to one side. They had to have a different life. And it requires a lot of self-inquiry, really, to acknowledge that we are enough, we are all enough. We don't have to have labels, we don't have to have status around us to be a valuable human being. But when that's stripped away from you, when it's stripped away so publicly, that can be a very hard humiliation to bear.
And what about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, when they have seen, certainly Virginia Giuffre's family talked about how, you know, a girl from a very humble background, sadly no longer with us, had sort of taken down a prince. For other victims there, and perhaps even people who weren't even linked in any way to Jeffrey Epstein, not linked in any way to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, he of course denies all the allegations against him, would they have felt some perhaps boost to their self-esteem when they saw what many people see as a form of justice against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that sense of feeling heard would have been incredibly powerful, that somehow so much around sexual assault and sexual violence against women and girls, which is fundamentally what we're talking about here, it's complicated by the fact that so many victims feel incredibly unheard and disbelieved. And this end result, which has seen Andrew Mountbatten Windsor losing titles, losing privileges, in a sense being punished in the way in which his, if you like, his tribe can punish him, would have been for the victims some sense of closure, that we were believed, that somebody listened to us and action was taken. And that really would have been worth its weight in gold.
Lucy, thank you. That's Lucy Beresford there, the psychotherapist and broadcaster. Lots coming on in David Lammy as well. And one person says, if prisoners are all fingerprinted, why do they not take prints on exit from prison to confirm identity? This country is ruined. Starmer can out. Well, maybe they do, but if they've got the wrong paperwork in terms of saying that they were the right person to be released, well, that's an issue in itself. David Lammy, says Linda in Deal, rude, entitled, arrogant and a liar. I'm not surprised the French cab driver had an argument with him. Lammy thinks he is superior to everyone. And Kelvin in Macclesfield just before the break. Good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon, Kelvin. David Lammy, mastermind, playing the blame game. They will blame the Spanish Armada and the birth of Christ next for all their failings. This party is a catastrophe. They take no responsibility for anything they do wrong. The £22 billion black hole was part of their own debt from the last time Labour were in power. They forgot that. Now, how big the country's debt is thanks to Abacus Reeves. She wants to grow the economy. Here's a tip for her. Try planting her plan into a grow bag. Like Miracle Grow, she stands a far better chance with that than ripping off the country. There's a lot of anger about David Lammy at the moment. There's a lot of anger about Labour. We'll see how the Sun is going to cover that tomorrow. We'll talk to Will Barker from the news desk in a second, and then we'll get your reaction right up to 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan comes on. This is a calamity for the government, and Calamity Lammy, can he survive? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Alan from Blackpool has been in touch and says, surely Lammy has misled the House. How can he have not? He's broken the ministerial code. He must resign forthwith. Matt says, currently serving 5 years for fraud in Belmarsh. Do you have any idea, or could you point me to the right direction of arranging a transfer to Wandsworth Prison? Just asking. Paul says, Reeves will be pleased that the spotlight is now on Lammy. This government stumbles from one calamity to another on a daily basis. And Yvonne says, if it wasn't serious, this would be something out of a comedy. Couldn't write the script. What an absolute shower. Well, Will Barker is Deputy Head of News at The Sun. I would imagine you'll be covering this story of David Lammy tomorrow on the prison releases.
Yes. Well, we're branding him Calamity Lammy in the gist of your messages there, because you know you've had it when you're covering your boss's job. It's your first big day. You stand there at the dispatch box, and he has an absolute mare. He stands there, gets absolutely overly agitated, gets very, very frustrated with James Cartledge, trying to defend this point, not slip out that they've let more people out, and then minutes later it emerges that one has gone, and then this afternoon it turns out another one's gone out of Wandsworth Prison. Yeah. And they're all sort of wandering around in the ether. And so we've been trying to help them with Brahim. He was wrongly freed. He was meant to be deported to Algeria.
And we know that he was initially assessed in 2020. It's been nearly 6 years. In February, in 2 or 3 months' time, it'll be 6 years. And they said they're in the initial stages of deporting him.
Yes.
I mean, it beggars belief.
It really does. It really does. And I mean, it's like Wandsworth Prison. I wonder what's happening there. Really, it's just an open door policy by the same.
Clearly, well, big coverage in The Sun tomorrow. Tell us about Prince William walking in his late mother's footsteps.
Well, yeah, this is very nice. We've got Wilco, Matt Wilkinson, our royal editor, out with Wills in Brazil. He doesn't tend to do too much stuff about his mum. I think he's quite defensive of it. But he's gone and stood at the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio today to sort of echo a picture of his mum, a famous picture of his mum from back in '91. And he says it because he's had lots of love out there, and lots of people have sort of been commenting on this, and he's sort of very taken the mob up there. The place got closed down for 45 minutes. He posed up, and this is all in advance of his Earthshot Prize awards that he's doing tonight. So nice sort of little moment he had today.
Well, the headline I have in front of me on this page is monumental stupidity. I don't think you're taking the very real possibility of Stonehenge being stolen seriously enough.
Well, maybe that might happen. I mean, this is absolutely... I mean, I presume you know the history of how Stonehenge got there.
Yes.
They rolled these things from Wales over days and months and possibly years to get there. But the chiefs at English Heritage, in wake of the Louvre robberies,
jewel heist,
the jewel heist, they thought it'd be a great idea that maybe they'd do some new training across the board, and so they sent this memo across all these places and sent it bizarrely to Stonehenge, and everybody's at Stonehenge thinking, hang on a minute. Are they suggesting that we need to defend that stones because one day that somebody might rock up and put them in the back of a lorry and drive
I think the likelihood of someone putting Stonehenge in the back of a van is probably fairly low. Are these people just on a mailing list, or was a sort of human error?
I think this is probably from the bosses. The bosses have put out a memo. It's sort of special training, hostile reconnaissance
training, hostile reconnaissance training.
Yes.
This is crazy. I do love that. One volunteer told The Sun, I'm not sure how a gang of thieves, no matter how big it is going to carry away one of these stones. Yeah. I think that's probably
But also,
fairly
how do you
unlikely.
fence it? Do you put it on eBay or like?
Stonehenge. And how do you know it's a stone from Stonehenge as well? They all look the same. Right, tell us about David Beckham. Of course, he is now Sir David.
Yes.
And there is Lady Beckham as well. And they had a big night out last night.
Well, yeah, I think it's no secret that David has wanted a knighthood for a number of years. This has sort of been almost his next career challenge.
Yes, a few problems with his tax.
Exactly.
I think may have
he had to
stopped
iron all that out.
Yes.
And he really yesterday he was very emotional about the whole thing. He keeps bursting into tears. And so, yeah, I think he had then celebrated in great style last night. He went to Gordon Ramsay's Michelin-starred restaurant in Chelsea with all the family. minus Brooklyn.
Minus Brooklyn, yeah.
And had a great old time. Our reporter Clemmy has got the inside details, which we've got in the paper tomorrow, about some of the things that went on. But we've got pictures of him leaving, looking quite emotional as he sort of tiptoes out the
Tired
restaurant.
and emotional?
Tired and emotional, maybe, yeah. And Victoria's in very oversized sunglasses at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they clearly had a good old time.
As you probably would, I would imagine, if you'd just been made a Knight of the Realm. Will, thank you very much. That's William Barker. He is Deputy Head of News at The Sun. All of that is in the paper tomorrow. You can read it online as well at thesun.co.uk. Next, we're going to take your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. And believe me, there's only one story you want to talk about, and that is David Lammy. We'll talk about that right up to 7 o'clock when Kevin O'Sullivan takes over. Loads to discuss here on Talk.
Muslims, we can't be anti-Semitic. Did you know that? Because
well, no offense, not you, but a lot of your Muslim friends, I think.
Our prophet was a Semitic.
So you're telling me that Muslims cannot be anti-Semitic? That it's part of your sacred creed?
Muslims cannot be against any religion. We are taught to coexist with peace and harmony with every religion.
Well, it's not really working out, is it? Particularly, shall we say, in Gaza.
Why not?
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
From Monday the 1st of December, our talkTV app is on the move. All of your favourite shows and podcasts, including the podcast of this programme launching today, the Talk Drive podcast, will continue. They're going to continue over on the Talk app. So if you're watching or listening on the talkTV app right now, you'll need to delete that and download a new app. And the new app is just the Talk app. You can get it from the App Store or Google Play. You can do it now. I did it in a couple of minutes the other day. Dead easy to do, and you'll never miss a programme. Lots of people getting in touch. Hannah says, I have no words for how disgusting Lamy's appalling performance was today. His demeanour, body language, arrogance and failure to answer the very simple question was one thing that was topped only now by the fact he knew all along about these two other mistaken releases and instead deflected and gaslit while not wearing a poppy. This is enough, surely. He has to go. It's shameful. Chris says, I'd never seen such a disgraceful Prime Minister question time. Lamy cannot handle pressure. He is cracked. Also, prison governor of HMP Wandsworth should be sacked like Lamy. Mac in Glasgow. David Lamy is an absolute disgrace and he is now a proven liar. I wonder why the Speaker wasn't harder on him, insisting that he answered the question he was asked. He clearly isn't up to the job and he owes it to the country and the families of the victims of these convicted, mistakenly released illegal migrant prisoners to resign. I'm fed up with these human rights laws as well. All they seem to do is protect the criminals and do nothing for the victims. That is Mac in Glasgow. Let's hear a voice note from Glenn on David Lamy, then I'll take a couple of calls. Here's Glenn.
I don't see the point in PMQs anymore, mate. All they do, they submit their questions so that some spad can do the reply and none of the questions ever get answered. It's just an illusion of democracy, mate.
I think a lot of that is right, Glenn, although they don't know the questions that are coming up from the opposition, but they may well be told from their own party. So there is at least some element of surprise there. I think Lamy was surprised to have all 6 questions about that. But yes, answers do need to be given. Let's get some answers now on what you think about this. Caroline is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Caroline, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Hi. I listen to Talk every day. I don't know what I'd do without all of you guys.
Well, thank you, Caroline.
Every day, there's something more horrendous. Every single day. David Lamy has got to be probably one of the worst MPs in UK history. He is an absolute disgrace. He's been a horrendous MP in Tottenham. I know that for a fact. He doesn't care about the constituents. He is not fit for any job in public office. And what I saw today is a man with a huge temper, which we know, and he can't handle stress. But what I also wanted to say is we have no judicial system works here anymore. It's corruption on a core that is off the scale. We have a government that has lied since the day they've got in. Lied, and no one is made accountable. We are not safe on our streets.
What should happen to Lamy now, Caroline, do you think?
Oh, he's got to go, and I want his pension revoked. I want him gone. It's not going to happen.
I do wonder, Caroline, how he can continue in office. I do think, you know, sometimes people are quite quick to say politicians should resign, but I do wonder when you've had a screw up of that catastrophic level, it does make me wonder. Caroline, thank you. Katie in North Yorkshire says, if Lamy knew about the accidental release last night, he should have owned up to it. And instead he got angry and blamed the previous government, as usual, playing the blame game. The Tories are no better, saying they also inherited a massive mess to sort out. Labour have been in charge long enough. It's time for accountability, not blame. Shame on this government. A couple of messages with rhymes in them as well. David in South Wales says, remember the 5th of November when Lamy the fool refused to be schooled. Paul also says from Hitchin in Hertfordshire, lovely town in Hertfordshire. Good afternoon, Peter. Grand show. Oh dear, poor old Lamy went all clammy when asked a question in the House. He answered with disdain from his tiny brain, with all the wits and droppings of a mouse, says Paul in Hitchin. Well, thank you for that. Let's speak to Michael in Hertfordshire, who's given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Michael, what do you make of all this?
Well, all I like to say is, how much longer are the Labour Party or the Labour cabinet going to blame the Conservatives? Are they going to blame them for the whole term they're going to be in? And I also have another suggestion. I think they should all resign and go and work for the BBC, because neither of them know what they're talking about.
I think all of those points are pretty fair. Michael, I do wonder, I mean, sometimes it's reasonable, isn't it, to say, actually, we're not going to turn things round in 16 months. It's going to take longer. And actually, the Conservatives left us a bad inheritance. But at what point do you say, actually, we've got to say, you're in charge, you're the government? At what point do you think it's reasonable to say that, and then at what point do we have to stop? 16 months, is that, or should it have been sooner? What do you think?
Well, I just think that they'd get a lot more respect if they took responsibility for their mistakes. But they keep making mistakes, and it can't carry on like this. It's becoming embarrassing for the country, and they're making the country into a terrible state, and it just can't carry on like this. Reality will set in eventually as things get worse and worse and worse, unfortunately. And then I don't know what's going to happen, because there'll be different parties and different votes, and I don't think there'll be a clear majority at the end of the 5 years with Labour. But
it'll be really interesting to see.
God help us all for the future.
Well, I think a lot of people feel that way, Michael, and thank you for your call. Heather in Kent has been in touch and says, I was diagnosed with arthritis in my 20s. I'm now in my 60s, riddled with arthritis and other issues. Heather, that sounds very difficult. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm fighting pain constantly, but I do have structure and purpose to my life. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, regardless of how many times I was up during the night. I make myself move, although I move poorly. I look after the street drains in my road, making sure they're not blocked with leaves before the rain comes. Everyone needs to do more, especially for the area in which they live. So many have no pride. Those on benefits should do some kind of community service to put something back into the system that keeps them. Heather, that's really struck a chord with me. What an incredible message. And even though you're suffering with those serious, serious issues, you have a routine, you have responsibilities that you've imposed on yourself, and you help people even with those perhaps some might think that's a small issue, but actually it's an important issue, and it's about pride in your community and pride in your home. Well done, Heather. I hope that's not a patronising thing to say. I just really am inspired, actually, by your message. Thank you. Anne-Marie's in Lanarkshire and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Anne-Marie, what would you like to say?
Hello. I'd like to say I think that the contract between the people and the government has actually broke down. I think people are going out to work watching others lie back in hotels, and they have to, and then stand outside schools where their children are. We're looking at a man today in Parliament that refuses to care what happens to the people on our street, and we have a speaker in the House that is backing him up. I think the contract between the people and the government is its lowest ebb ever.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Anne-Marie, and I think what we saw in the House of Commons today was absolute contempt for the public. Absolutely. It was contempt for the voters. He could have given us the full information. He didn't. He's now trying to hide behind a statement. He's trying to hide behind the Metropolitan Police, who, as far as I'm concerned and as far as I can work out, are completely blameless in this. There is precedent for us all. The problem for me, Anne-Marie, as someone who's worked in politics, is I know there are, you're not going to believe me, but I know there are good people in politics. I had dinner with one of them last night in the House of Commons who's a Labour MP who I have a lot of time for. And the problem is that there are politicians, there are people in public life who want to do the right thing, who want to make life better, but for every one of those there are maybe 10 David Lammies, and I just don't know why anybody sitting at home watching Prime Minister's Questions today would think actually those people who run our country are doing a good job.
But they're not the ones that are picked for the jobs. They're the ones that have to fight from the back benches. Our government, look at who Starmer's surrounding himself with. Lammy had frightened a man and a taxi driver that much that he ran off with his suitcases and had to go all those miles back the next again day. That can't be what our country stands for. The Prime Minister won't do anything about these people. That's my point.
You're right, Anne-Marie. It's got to be better than this. It's got to be, we've got to have a better type of politician. We've got to have better leaders, and we just don't have them at the moment. Instead, what we have are the David Lammies of this world. Anne-Marie, thanks for your call. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody else who's got in touch today, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on with text messages or voice notes or calls. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get everybody on, but we have had, I think, a really useful discussion about just how bad things are, and they're personified, I'm afraid, by the Deputy Prime Minister. Kevin O'Sullivan is here on the other side of the news. Kevin, no doubt David Lammy, you're going to be talking about him.
Absolutely. I mean, he got, credit to the Tories. I mean, they completely ambushed him. I think through his dense head when James Cartledge kept asking the same question. I think it began to dawn on him that Cartledge knew something that he didn't know.
Well, but the problem is he did know it. He did know it.
He knew.
He knew. He had a piece of paper in front of him with a statement with the information on it.
So he just chose to shout and bluster and make a fool of it.
Yes, he could have taken the piece of paper. He could have read it out. Instead, he's hiding behind.
So he was given a. I didn't realise.
Yes, he was briefed last night on the whole thing. He was given a piece of paper.
Why didn't he just say?
Well,